This is an ABC News special, The 92 Vote. Reporting from the ABC News Election Night Command Center in New York, David Brinkley and Peter Jennings.
Well, here we go again, David.
Here we go again.
Nice to have you. We were trying to figure out a little earlier how many votes we've counted together in the last 8 years.
Millions, millions, millions. I don't know how many.
Good evening to you and welcome to our full-scale election night coverage. We'll be here until it's over. It's 7 o'clock here in the East. The polls have just closed in 6 states, and in a minute we'll project the winners and the losers in those states. It's going to be an exciting evening, no doubt, just as it has turned out to be a momentous year. Not for many years have so many people been engaged by the political process. All across the country today, there appears to have been a monumental turnout. It's exciting because as we watch the decay and even the chaos in other parts of the world, Americans are out making individual choices. And it's been a momentous campaign because an overwhelmingly popular president has ended up fighting a fight he never imagined for his political future. Because a young political challenger is tonight within a whisker, perhaps, of becoming the first American president born after World War II. And because there aren't too many other places where a billionaire can reach deep into his pockets and decide he will lay claim to the highest political office in the land. And there is so much more to report tonight. The entire House of Representatives is up for grabs, a third of the Senate, 12 governor's chairs, and enough fascinating propositions which voters have put on the ballot in enough places that we will be busy late into the night. Our job here is to tell you who's won and why. If we can, we'll talk to the winners and the losers, review the past, and look to the future. By the way, there's so much interest worldwide in this election that this broadcast is going to 15 countries, including all across Russia, and so we welcome all of you. As I said, the polls have just closed. Let us get to our primary job, which is that of telling you who is winning or losing when we can. The polls have closed in Florida. Let's take a look. It is in Florida too close to call. 25 electoral votes, very important for President Bush, part of the Southern strategy. That is still too close to call. In Georgia, which last voted for a Democrat in 1980, we project that Governor Bill Clinton is the winner. You'll recall the Bush campaign running some very negative ads about Governor Clinton in the final days, but we project that Governor Clinton has won that state in the South. In Virginia, where President Bush won in '88, it is too close to call at this hour, 13 electoral votes. Same thing is true for South Carolina, which has voted Republican in 6 of the last 8 elections. It is too close to call at this hour. New Hampshire, on the other hand, we project goes to Governor Clinton. They last voted for a Democrat in 1964 for Lyndon Johnson, but before that, 1948. This is where it happened. This is where the message was that the economy was the issue of the year, and we project that New Hampshire has gone for Governor Bill Clinton. In Vermont, we also project that the winner is going to be Bill Clinton, and since 1860, Vermont has voted Republican in every election but one, and we give that to Governor Clinton. Now, Indiana president, he has been too close to call for the last hour or so, Dan Quayle's home state, but we now project that at the presidential level, the 12 electoral votes there will go to President Bush. There's no question, if you'd looked at the polls before this evening, it was an uphill struggle for President Bush. Based on the polls, at least, that's an important win in Indiana for President Bush tonight. And in Kentucky, where the polls closed about an hour ago, we still project it is too close to call. So, David, there we are. We're off and running.
We are off and running, and I'm now going to bring you up to date on some of the races for Congress, for the Senate specifically. Both parties were hopeful of improving their strength in the Senate so as to get through Congress whatever they wanted to get. Here's how it stands at the moment. We do not yet know who will gain and who will lose, but at the moment, beginning with Florida, where the polls are closed, as Peter just said, the incumbent Senator Bob Graham, we project, was reelected. He is a freshman seeking his second term, immensely popular governor. He was opposed by Bill Grant, who couldn't raise enough money, drove around the state in a beat-up Jeep. It wasn't enough. Graham wins. In Georgia, the polls are closed. In the contest for the Senate, there's Wyche Fowler and Paul Coverdale. It is now too close to call. We will stay on top of it and give you the news when we have it. In South Carolina, Senator Fritz Hollings, who's been in the Senate almost forever, spent his campaign attacking those people in Washington, of whom he has been one for 26 years. However, that has not yet worked either, so it is too close to call. In New Hampshire, Senator Warren Rudman retired, as you may recall, and he is Now, John Rao, the millionaire former businessman, is running to take his place, and Judd Gregg, the former governor, is running, and this also is too close to call. In Vermont, it is not too close to call. Patrick Leahy, seeking a fourth term in the Senate, has a fourth term, and that's that. Patrick Leahy, the Democrat, re-elected in Vermont. The governorship in New Hampshire, also too close to call, is Deborah Arnie Arneson and Stephen Merrill, too close to call. In Vermont, we do, however, have a winner. Howard Dean, the incumbent, is the winner. Howard Dean, the Democrat, elected in Vermont for governor. Peter?
I was just thinking, listening there, having to talk about Vermont and other places, we'll get slowed down and tell an awful lot of stories this evening about all of these states and all of these races. Deborah Aronson, for example, who called for a rise in the state income tax, or sales tax, rather, to take the relief off property tax, and still it's too close to call. Let us give you just a little tour of this place for a second. There's our big map up there with the electoral votes. It takes 270 electoral votes, as you know, and that's the way it counts as of now, with a lot too close to call. Governor Clinton has 20 electoral votes and President Bush has 12. One of the things that has impressed us all in this news division today, and I'm sure it's been true in every news division, is the perpetuation of voter interest, of voter engagement. Talking about voter turnout today, ABC's Jeff Greenfield, who's here with us in New York, you I know have been on the phone to scores of people all over the country tonight, and even you are stunned at some of the stories you're getting back.
And not easily stunned. You're absolutely right. We actually decided to do something new and talk to real people. And the fact is, no matter where we're calling, literally from Alabama to Alaska, the story is the same. In Florida, in one district where a gentleman named Daniel Webster is trying to be elected to the House, we're told we don't have to get out the vote, the campaign workers are telling us. Elderly people are waiting in 88-degree heat for 3 hours. We're bringing ice water to them. In Alabama, we're told that they've never seen turnout this great from Alabama to the Florida line. In Alaska, the same story. In Georgia, people waiting 2 hours in the hot sun. Now, we'll find out in several hours whether this makes for real events, that is real history. But it is clear that what we're hearing is something we haven't heard in a very long time. And it's maybe the story of the evening.
Yeah, in fact, Jeff, take a look. We've got a map here somewhere, or a graph at least, which shows what it looks like since 1960 on, because everybody's been talking about the lack of American engagement in the voter process. Right. What was the record year, 60?
In 1960, roughly 61.5% of the voting age population turned out for a very close Kennedy-Nixon contest. That was a generational shift. The Eisenhower World War II generals yielding to the privates. It's been going down virtually without cessation, and if what we're hearing tonight is true, it may tick up substantially.
Okay, Jeff, thanks. We'll be coming back to Jeff Greenfield many times in the course of this evening, and undoubtedly we will kick conventional wisdom in the head a few more times before this evening is over as well. In a moment, we'll come back and talk to ABC's Lynn Sherr, who analyzes and studies and passes on to the rest of us what the voters have been telling us in the exit polls. Stay with us.
November 3rd, 1992. All across the nation, votes are being cast to select the 42nd President of the United States of America. From ABC News, this is the 92 Vote. Brought to you by Chrysler Corporation. The 92 Vote will continue in a moment. From ABC News, this is the 92 Vote. Once again, David Brinkley and Peter Jennings.
Well, exit polls have been with us long enough now that I think everybody knows why we use them. We do not use them to tell you how people have voted, but how people have voted. And ABC's Lynn Sherr has been doing, what, your 8th year now, I think, on telling us why people voted and what they liked and what they didn't like?
Well, I wasn't going to count, but thanks anyway. Yeah, you know, it's just fascinating. I think it's one of the most fascinating parts of the evening because we get the real nitty-gritty about exactly why they cast their votes. And I want to take the moment now to explain a little bit of why President Bush is having such a tough time in Florida, a state, Peter, you called as a toss-up state. This is a state he did extremely well in 1988. The reason is that he is not doing well with voter groups that he won handily back in 1988. Let's start with the Florida independents. President Bush is getting only 28% of the Florida independents. Now, when you look at this number, think about the fact that 4 years ago he got twice as much, 56% of the Florida independent voters. Just to show you what's going on, Bill Clinton is getting 38% of the Florida independents, and Ross Perot is coming in with 34%. That explains a lot about why Mr. Bush is having a tough time in Florida. Now, when we look at the national picture, the real issue, of course, tonight is the economy. We asked voters which were the most important issues. 43% of them said the economy. That is twice as high as those who said the next important issue, but that's the deficit, 22%. And after that, at 21%, is health care. Finally, in New Hampshire, a state that we have called for Mr. Clinton, that economic issue is cutting very strong. We asked voters the Reagan question: are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? Only 14% said they were better off. 44% said they were worse off than they were 4 years ago. 41% say we're about the same. And when you look at this 44% number, most of them, about 60%, voted for Bill Clinton. Peter?
Lynn, just a general question. You don't necessarily have to go to your buttons there for a second, but on the character question, how are people responding to the character of the candidates?
It's not showing up on our polling, Peter. It's simply not an issue that voters are voting on. They have strong feelings about it. We'll tell you some more about that later, but it is not the issue that they're voting on.
Okay,
Peter?
and you're picking up this enormous turnout of people as well, about everywhere you look?
I beg your pardon, Peter?
Are you picking up this enormous turnout everywhere of people you look?
Yeah, you know, exit polls are not where we see the turnout, though. We'll be able to analyze that a little bit later. That's just raw vote, and anecdotally, yes, the answer is absolutely.
David, what do you think it was? We were just talking a little while ago about the fact that I think we in the press missed the voter engagement. Do you think it was the debates that made the difference?
I think the debates had a great deal to do with it, plus the fact that so many people are suffering because of the recession. They feel that politically something should be done to help them. If everyone were working, everyone had income, they wouldn't worry so much, wouldn't pay so much attention to the politics. They wouldn't care.
Okay, look, because it's early in the evening, let's just keep you up to date, or get you and ourselves up to date with what it is we've called so far this evening. It's only 7:15 in the Eastern time zone. We've got a couple of maps we can give you a sense of what the picture looks like at the moment. Indiana, we have now projected, has been won by President Bush. That's Dan Quayle's home state, as you know, voted Republican in 7 of the last 8 elections, the state they really wanted. We project that Georgia has gone to Governor Clinton. That's 13 electoral votes there. This is Governor Clinton getting into that southern stronghold that the Republicans had 4 years ago. New Hampshire, we award to Governor Clinton. Vermont, we award to Governor Clinton. And there were a number of too close to call. Lynn Sherr was talking about Florida still too close to call, Virginia too close to call, South Carolina too close to call, and Kentucky too close to call. On the Senate side, you haven't seen any surprise?
No, I haven't seen anything new yet. We have seen no surprises because many of them are, as you have heard, too close to call. We can't tell yet because of, as you have been saying, the turnout is so large. It's taking a long time to count them all.
It is partly that, but it's also partly because I think, as we saw in the polls running up until the very end of the evening, in many of these elections, it was going to be too close to call. Before. Can we go to Washington now and talk to ABC's Cokie Roberts, who's going to keep a handle on the House for us this evening. In Cokie, a novel way to say the least.
The House of Representatives, 435 in total. We always seem to forget this, but all of them are up for election tonight. Now, in a normal election year, that is not really much of a problem. Of the incumbents in the House who choose to run again, a good 90% and more generally are reelected. But this could be a different kind of night. First, let's look at the way things stand. Right now, there are 166 seats held by Republicans in the House, 268 seats held by Democrats, 1 by Bernie Sanders, an independent from Vermont. And in fact, in the House of Representatives, there are no assigned seats. We've just assigned a little seat to him for tonight. And in theory, at least, every single one of these seats could be turned over. It could be a whole blank slate. Now, we know that that's not likely to be the case, but there will be a lot of new faces in the House of Representatives. We know of already close to 100 who won't be in the House again. They've either resigned, they've run for another office, they've been defeated in primaries, or there are 2 incumbents who are forced to run against each other because of redistricting. So we'll be looking for a lot of new faces in the House. The question is whether those faces are going to be a big Republican pickup, as there might have been we thought earlier, or whether the Democrats hold their own, which might be the case.
Well, now, Cook, you've been blithely going on about the political importance of what's been happening up there, and I'm sure voters at home have been wondering where you are. And we're saying, Mr. Director, are we allowed to tell people? Shouldn't we insist on telling people? Koki, could you turn around and do that for us once more?
Well, all right. Here you see chairs before me.
Whoops.
And here's where I am. It is a little magic, a little TV magic, but this is it. This looks like the House of Representatives, and in fact, this is a picture of the House of Representatives.
It's even got the right rug on the floor.
It is indeed. It is a picture of the House of Representatives, in case you've not voted there, and we were able to recreate it technologically for people to give them a sense of time and place. Koki, let me ask you about women and minorities. What are we looking for in the House tonight, do you think?
I think we will see large pickups of both. We certainly know for a fact that there will be large pickup of minorities because the Voting Rights Act was amended to require states to draw districts for minorities, and there's some very odd districts that have been drawn to do that. We could see a couple of them if we'd like to. We have in Florida a district that is very peculiarly shaped, that was created for a minority member, a black member. And in Chicago, a district that's come to be called the earmuff district because it has sections. Here's the Florida district, and there's Chicago. You see the earmuffs for picking up Hispanics in various sections of the city of Chicago. So we know that we will have, because of the Voting Rights Act, large numbers more of minorities. And we expect to have a lot more women because a full 108 women are running, have the nominations of the major parties. And so we think that we'll probably see double the current number, or close to it, of the 29 women now in the House, which is a record high so far.
Koki, I think maybe we went over that a little too fast for other than the politically aware. If we could put up pick Chicago or Florida again, and explain to people, Koki, if you would, why a congressional district now looks as strange as it does. If our director could put up Chicago.
Chicago, you see, the idea was to find as many Hispanics in the city of Chicago as could be found. But since they don't necessarily all live together, since they didn't know that they had to live together to be a congressional voting group, the district had to be drawn, but it's still supposed to all be contiguous. So it's drawn to have two big blocks, those what are called the earmuffs, the top and bottom there, of Hispanic neighborhoods, and then go along streets to pick up a few more Hispanics along the way.
Is it fair to call this affirmative gerrymandering?
I guess it is.
Yeah.
It is. Gerrymandering has been with us since the very first congressional districts, not even redistricting, the first districting. And they were always done for political purposes. Now they're being done for purposes of racial balance.
And because the Democrats are in control of the Congress, they get a greater say in how these districts are designed.
Yes, but these districts do not help Democrats. These districts do produce more minority districts, and those candidates are likely to be Democrats. But what they do also is take strong minority blocks out of old districts that were Democratic districts and make them far more Republican. And that we'll see a lot of that happening tonight, where Democrats lose seats because they've lost large minority blocks in their districts.
Okay, Koki, thanks very much. And we're going to come back in just a moment and talk about the political leadership in the Congress, whether or not it is threatened this evening. Hope you'll stay with us. For David Brinkley, I'm Peter Jennings. We'll be right back.
From ABC News, this is continuing coverage of the 92 vote. Once again, David Brinkley and Peter Jennings.
Welcome back to our election coverage. Just an advisory to some of you in the stations. We're going to cut away every half hour like that. Some stations will want to fill you in on very important local races, and so we'll oblige that to happen, or we'll accommodate that every half hour. And if you want to stay with us for the national results, we'll continue right through the half hour. But here's the map. This is what we're looking at. This is the important map we will fill in tonight. On top there, you can see the electoral vote. As of now, President Bush has 12, Governor Clinton has 20. The magic number is 270. In order to win the presidency, and on the right there, the number of states which they're going to win. Now, it's 7:30 p.m. here in the East. The polls have just closed in 3 more states with 40 electoral votes, and let's take a look so far at what we know. There's been a lot too close to call so far, and that is the case in Ohio at the moment, where there were 21 electoral votes, one of the big battleground states. We now estimate that is still too close to call. President Bush won it 4 years ago. They have been campaigning like mad in Ohio. It's very important for the Republicans to win in Ohio, and no Republican has won the White House without first winning there, and it is at this hour too close to call with the polls having closed. Similar for North Carolina, where the Democrats and the Republicans both fought very hard for the state. We also estimate that is too close to call. Al Gore was there just a couple of days ago. There is some hope for the Democrats there. It's that southern Republican base that the Democrats are going after. In West Virginia, on the other hand, we now project that Governor Clinton is the winner in West Virginia. 5 electoral votes there. Not an enormous surprise. West Virginia voted Democratic in 6 of the last 8 elections. Here's what the electoral vote total looks like overall. Clinton 25 and President Bush 12. I want to talk briefly to ABC's Jeff Greenfield here for a second, because, Jeff, even though that map looks a bit empty from our point of view at the moment, it shouldn't really look like that for Republicans this early in the evening, should it?
No, and that's the key. You say that Florida's too close to call. 4 years ago, Michael Dukakis closed his Florida office by about the 1st of October. The South has been the most reliably Republican bloc. When I was young, it was the solid South meant Democratic. It's delivered 130 electoral votes, the South and border states, to Republicans more often than not. If Clinton is even forcing Bush to struggle for his natural base, and taking Georgia, and taking Vermont and New Hampshire, 2 of the most Republican states in New England, it's trouble for Bush, even though the map is really
And it was part of the strategy, part of the reason Al Gore from Tennessee was put on the ticket.
It was part of that strategy, and it's one of the reasons why, in fact, it was Bill Clinton himself who, as I understand it, overrode his staff, said, give up Florida. Clinton said, no, we can contest it, at least force the president to spend time and money there. If the state's too close to call, that strategy worked.
Thanks, Jeff. Happened in a lot of places, by the way. Happened that Governor Clinton went out and forced President Bush to campaign, as Jeff has said, in parts of the country where he did not early on expect he was going to have to. David, you've got some Senate calls, I think.
I do indeed, Peter. Beginning in Ohio, which, as you've just said, is closed a few minutes ago. About 20 years ago, John Glenn became the first American to encircle the Earth as an astronaut. He became a hero. He was elected to the Senate. 18 years later, he is looking for a 4th term in the Senate, and he may or may not get it because at the moment the race is too close to call. One of his opponents keeps saying to him, John, after 20 years as a hero, what have you done for us? That's the question. It is now too close to call. We'll return to it when we know the result. In North Carolina, the incumbent Senator Terry Sanford, who's had a long career in North Carolina politics as a college president and a former governor, he had a heart problem recently, had to have surgery, took time out from the campaign, which may have hurt him. It is now too close to call. He is running against a man named Locke Faircloth, who's a businessman and an associate of Jesse Helms, of great fame in North Carolina and beyond. We'll return to that. Too close to call.
Just like the presidential race in North Carolina, still too close to call.
Right. And in the race for governor in North Carolina, James B. Hunt Jr., known as Jim Hunt to everybody, has been elected. He has won his race for governor of North Carolina, Jim Hunt. West Virginia, Gaston Caperton, the Democrat, the incumbent governor, has won a new term as governor of West Virginia. Peter?
Highest rate of unemployment in the country, West Virginia, 10.6% this year, so it's where the economy really cut. And the Democrats have had that for a long time, of course.
Coal mines have had a lot of unemployed people forever.
Yeah, somebody said the passion for Democrats there was just about as deep as the coal mine in some cases. In a moment, we want to go to the campaign's headquarters, and we'll talk to Jim Wooten. We'll talk to Britt Hume, who's down there with President Bush in Houston, and Chris Bury, who's out in Little Rock. Hope you'll stay with us. We'll be right back.
From our Election Night Command Center in New York, ABC News coverage of the 92 vote will continue in a moment. From ABC News Election Night Command Center in New York, this is the 92 vote. Once again, David Brinkley and Peter Jennings.
I'm not sure it's a very politically astute observation, David, but when you talk about John Glenn, who's in trouble in Ohio, has been in trouble, had difficulty retiring his debt from the time he ran for president, it does tell you how time marches on, as you said, from the time he was a national hero.
It does indeed, and it's astonishing how many candidates for office this year have got into trouble because of the SNL failures and the money involved. Keating, who's now in prison, and lying about their military service. There are numerous people who claim to have been war heroes when they weren't even there.
You know, when I talk to people about politicians and say, well, you know, X is a liar, they all say, well, they're all liars. But the fact that one would shade the truth or alter the truth about something that's on the record continues to stun me.
Can be so easily found out. It's kind of a dumb thing to do.
All right, want to move around the country a little. Want to go down to Houston now, where ABC's White House correspondent Brit Hume is standing by. Have you seen the president this evening?
We have not seen him this evening here. This is the ballroom at this hotel, a room about a quarter the size of the room that he used 4 years ago. He'll come here later, but not until the polls close in California. On his way out this evening to be with some friends, some reporters did shout at him a question about the exit polls. He said exit polls don't vote. He also said, however, Peter, I've been better, I've been happier. The things you and Jeff Greenfield were just talking about are not lost on him. He knows.
Britt, I should probably know this, but are you in the hotel which the president regards as his residence?
I'm not. I'm in a different hotel, the one that's being used for the what has been hoped for a victory celebration tonight.
But I did hear somewhere that the hotel which he does use as a residence is about to close up. Am I correct?
Well, that hotel's been in some financial difficulty, and it's been in Chapter 11 bankruptcy for a while, but it's still going. It's pretty luxurious.
Okay, Britt, so what you are in general picking up, not a very positive mood there.
Well, Peter, I mean, I think just the fact that this little reception compared to what he had 4 years ago, and the decision on where to do this was one that was made relatively late in the game, only last week. So somebody knew what was going on. It's just a little tiny affair here compared to what we saw in '88.
Okay, Britt, we'll come back to a number of times throughout the evening. Want to move over to Little Rock now, where ABC's Chris Bury is standing by outside the old State House. A lot of flags out there, Chris.
Peter, it's not going to be a little affair here. In fact, they're preparing for the biggest party that Little Rock has ever seen. They've blocked off 16 square blocks. There are going to be at least 4 big parties going on in various places downtown. They expect music and food and celebrating until dawn.
They're that confident, huh?
They're very confident. They're expecting a fairly sizable victory. The governor himself took a little nap this afternoon. He went out jogging for a while, went to a McDonald's. We're told he watched part of a John Wayne movie. The staff is extremely confident. The most striking thing about the campaign is perhaps not its enthusiasm now, but the emotional things that are going on. When Clinton came back today from his trip, he was greeted with hugs at the airport, and I think it's going to be a highly emotionally charged night here tonight.
It may be a little early in the evening, I grant you, for trivia, but I remember up in New Hampshire, his wife was on his case because he couldn't pass a McDonald's without stuffing his face, and yet at various stages in the campaign, he seems to slim down just like that. How does he do it?
Well, he's been running a lot, sometimes as long as an hour every morning. He's told us he's lost about 20 to 25 pounds since New Hampshire.
Are there invitations to this party tonight, Chris, or anybody who wants to wander in?
Well, we understand that the State House here is reserved for special guests for now, and I think that after that, the other parties, people can just wander in.
Okay, Chris, thanks very much. We'll come back to you throughout the evening. Don't want to make too much of this, but there is no declaration of victory. It's still too close to call in a lot of states. It may look like trouble for the Republicans so far, and everybody knew going into this election night how much of an uphill climb it was for the president, but it is not a victory for Governor Clinton as yet. I want to go now to Columbia, South Carolina, where we are joined this evening, our first, I guess you could call it political interview of this evening, by Governor Carroll Campbell, the South Carolina Republican, first elected in 1986. Your state is still too close to call, sir. Why do you think that is?
Oh, I just believe it'll come in. I think the Republicans will win South Carolina probably by 6 or 8 points before it's over with. Just a matter of when the exit polls, sometimes they're a little off.
We are told that you've built a formidable Republican organization in that state. Is that true? You're willing to take full credit for that?
Absolutely not. The president himself would carry South Carolina.
Can we have a look at the board which shows the popular vote in South Carolina at the moment? I think we can. It shows at the moment on the popular vote with how many precincts? 8% of the precincts reporting, Governor, that President Bush is up by about 20 points. There have been some reports that there have been some difficulties in the Republican Party in South Carolina with tension between the sort of centrist wing and the religious right. Can you explain that to us?
Well, I don't think there's that much tension. As a matter of fact, all of the factions of the party have been mobilized behind President Bush. And I haven't seen any fragmentation at all here.
Can you give us some sense of how you think it'll look for the Republican Party throughout the South before the night is over?
I think we'll win Florida. I think we'll win Texas. I think we can win North Carolina. We didn't expect to win Georgia, and of course Tennessee was very iffy all the time. And I believe we'll win Virginia. I believe we'll win Mississippi. And Alabama is still something that we can win.
And how would you assess what sort of inroads, generally speaking, Governor Clinton and Senator Gore have made into the South? How big an impression do you think they've made?
Well, both being from southern states, they obviously were able to draw better than most people could running in the South. But the fact is they couldn't carry it all, even though they were both from down here. And Bush, of course, being from Texas, should help us carry the Texas side of it.
Have you added up the electoral votes from these states you say you're confident they will carry?
Well, I've looked at them, but I'm not projecting electoral vote at all. I'm just having to wait until the real vote comes in and see where we are. I know that it's going to be a close election, and I know that we have to win some states that are too close to call right now, but I can tell you back in 1978, one of the networks projected I'd lost a race for Congress, and they came back on later and projected I'd won. So I'm not one that, that shuts down the shop this early.
I hope it wasn't this network, was it, Governor?
No, it wasn't.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Appreciate you taking the time. Governor mentioned that Governor Clinton, in fact, has won Georgia, so let's move over to Georgia now and talk to Senator Sam Nunn, who has joined us from Atlanta this evening. What do you think of the result of the state so far? Are you surprised at all? Did you think it would go this well from the beginning?
I'm like Governor Campbell in the sense that I'm not going to project until the votes are actually in, but I think we're going to win Georgia. I think there's a lot of enthusiasm here. The Democrats have had the enthusiasm, the Republicans have not. So I feel real good about Georgia and the South and the whole election.
You feel a little more optimistic about the rest of the South than Governor Campbell does?
Well, I feel that Clinton and Gore will split the South and win a number of key states, and with the other states where they're leading, I think we're going to have a pretty substantial victory.
Why are the Democrats doing so much better this time, Senator, than they have in the past?
Number one,
the
economy. Number two, we've had a terrific ticket. Bill Clinton is a great candidate. Al Gore is a great candidate. Hillary and Tipper have done a great job, both on the issues and on the organization.
Was there any other issue besides the economy which cut in Georgia this year?
I would say mainly the economy, but it goes beyond that. I think Governor Clinton was perceived as the candidate of the future, and President Bush, even by those who liked him, was perceived as the candidate of the past without much vision for the future.
Senator Nunn, thank you very much. I should point out to people that you are not running for re-election this year. Chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, and a man who, if there is a Clinton administration, is going to be looked to in a very specific way in terms of certainly advice on international and military affairs and the new world order. Let's now go up to Lynn Sherr. Lynn, we're talking a little bit there about issues in the South and the president's issues and Governor Clinton's issues. How are the presidents cutting?
Not very well is the simple answer, Peter. You are well aware, you and David, that with the president out on the stump, he has been pushing a number of issues, and we took a look to see whether voters cared about them and whether they were the ones they were voting on. Let's see what they had to say. When it came to the most important issues, one of the big issues the president talked about was family values. But when we talked to voters, only about 14% of them said that was important in their vote tonight. As for another issue we talked about, taxes, the tax and spend Democrats, only 13% said that that was an important issue. And finally, the big issue of foreign policy, that is here, only 8% said that that was important to their vote. Now, another thing the president talked about out on the stump was Mr. Clinton's draft record. Well, in fact, the larger group, 50% of our voters that we talked to, said that they did not believe that Mr. Clinton was truthful on the draft. But hold on and look at the numbers to come. We also asked voters whether they felt that Mr. Bush was truthful on Iran-Contra. 69% said no. Compare that to the 50% that said that Mr. Clinton was not truthful on the draft. You see that the issue simply didn't cut. It came back to haunt him himself. Finally, on this issue of the draft, we also talked to veterans to see how they voted. The idea was they were not supposed to vote for Bill Clinton. Well, look at what happened. Mr. Bush got 35% of the veterans' vote, but Bill Clinton got 46% of their vote, and Ross Perot got 19%. When you look at these numbers, you realize this is a group that Mr. Bush won very easily back in 1988. Not at all this evening, at least not so far.
Lynn,
Peter?
can you stay on that one for just a second? Because I think that's going to fascinate a lot of people. Was there any way to break it down between veterans of Vietnam or veterans of Korea or World War II? Because that really did make a difference to people, I think.
You're getting ahead of me. We do have those numbers. We can't give them to you yet for the entire country, but I promise next time you come we'll have that. We do have the answer. We've broken it down also to people who oppose the Vietnam War. They, as you might well expect, supported Bill Clinton in large numbers. But veterans on the whole across the board are supporting Bill Clinton.
Looking at that 19%, though, for Ross Perot in terms of the veterans is a little bit surprising, David, because he made such an appeal to the military. In fact, said on more than one occasion that this was really why he was doing it.
Well, they're independent-minded people who know what they want from government, and they're going to vote for whomever gives it to them. I would like to make a brief prediction here. You had Senator Nunn of Georgia here a minute ago, highly regarded in the Senate and in Washington in general. I would predict that if Clinton is elected, if he is, he will ask Sam Nunn to be Secretary of Defense, and Sam Nunn will turn him down.
Why will he turn him down?
Because he likes being in the Senate. He's chairman of the Armed Services Committee, and he thinks that's the best job in town, and he may be right.
Yes, in the new world order, the Secretary of Defense is a much more challenging job, a job certainly which will be defined much more differently.
Maybe so.
Also in that Georgia campaign, interesting that there were a lot of radio commercials run by the Republicans in the final day, you remind me of this, in which they said that Governor Clinton, if elected, would close down military bases in Georgia, said the same thing in North Carolina, and if you believe the exit polls that Lynn has just referred to about veterans, that one didn't take particular hold either. We're going to come back in a moment and talk to Jim Wooten in Washington about the Senate. We'll be back right after this.
Yeah, you've got a little time. You've got a little time.
From the ABC News Election Night Command Center in New York, this is the 92 Vote. Once again, David Brinkley and Peter Jennings.
In that long run of results, which we did at, 8 o'clock Eastern Time when so many polls closed their eyes, one slight correction, or at least clarification. In Maine, though we project that Governor Clinton is the winner in Maine, he doesn't get all 4 electoral votes. He gets 3 of the 4. Maine and Nebraska are the only 2 states in the country where it is not winner take all. So he doesn't get all 4 electoral votes in Maine. In Maine, that's important. And the same will be true for whomever wins on what basis in Nebraska.
Several other states are talking about doing it.
Talking about doing it. I'm going to ask Hal Bruno. Hal Bruno's our political director here. Would you stand up for a second? Well, why the proportional representation on that electoral vote thing to start with? Get out of your way here
Maine and Nebraska are individualists. They just decided to do it that way. The purpose of the Electoral College was to make sure that there would be a decisive winner. So if you start amending it so you're going to award electoral votes on a proportionate basis, you'll defeat the purpose of the Electoral College.
Now, what you do for us all the time is you don't just sit there and watch the polls. You talk, I think more than anybody in this organization, you talk to the politicians all over the country. Give us a sense at this point in the evening of what you think we're seeing, and how close does it come to what they've been talking about?
It comes very close to what they've been talking about, Peter. And what you're seeing is when you look at that map and you see that Rust Belt that starts in New Jersey, goes all across the Middle Atlantic and Midwestern Great Lakes states, down into Missouri. It was always felt that that was going to be the decisive battleground. And what you're seeing thus far tonight is in those crucial states like New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Michigan, so far, Bill Clinton is the winner.
One of the impressions that I got in the, I don't know if this is true for you, Dave, but one of the impressions I got in the last couple of days of the campaign, maybe the last week when the president was really charging hard, that these states to which you're currently referring were really going to be even tighter than they've turned out to be this evening.
Yeah, the expectation was that they were going to be much tighter than they've turned out to be this evening. The other thing you're seeing so far is states like, say, Massachusetts and Illinois, which have a sizable number of electoral votes, which were never competitive in this election. From the start of the fall campaign onward, the Bush campaign realized it didn't have much of a chance to win those states. So they've had to give up all over the country, I'd say, maybe 100, 110 electoral votes that were never within their reach.
And is this, as I said, coming pretty close to what you thought you were seeing on election eve?
It comes pretty close, yeah. It's following the pattern that everybody who's been involved in the campaign was expecting.
Okay, no surprises you've seen so far this evening?
No surprises.
Carol Moseley
so
Braun
far.
in Illinois, you're an old Chicago hand. You thought she'd win that?
Well, she had gotten to the point where, at the point she got in trouble, she already had such a lead that it wasn't possible for her opponent to overcome it. If she hadn't had such a big lead and then had trouble that she got that resulted in her campaign, she might have lost the election, but she was okay.
Okay, great, Hal. We'll come back to you shortly. David, we want to talk now very briefly to Ron Brown, who's the chairman of the Democratic National Party. I don't know where you are, Mr. Brown. You want to tell us?
I'm in Washington, D.C., Peter.
And you're at the DNC headquarters tonight, are you?
No, I'm at the Shoreham Hotel, where we're having planning a big victory celebration tonight.
Okay. You've been listening to Hal Bruno, our political director, talk about the Rust Belt there. What do you think has made the difference for the campaign?
I think America's ready for change. The status quo just isn't good enough anymore. Most Americans have felt that George Bush just hasn't spoken to the needs and aspirations and goals of everyday working men and women and working families who are struggling to make ends meet. And they couldn't just see 4 more years of the same. They wanted a new direction and new leadership, and Bill Clinton and Al Gore represent that new leadership.
Were there some element of personality involved in the voting patterns, you think?
Well,
Mr. Bush being Mr. Bush and Mr. Clinton being Mr. Clinton, two quite different people?
There always is in presidential elections, Peter, but I think it's much deeper than that this time. This is a watershed election for the United States. In my judgment, George Bush and the Republican Party, to a great degree, has been a party that wants power but doesn't really know what it wants to do when it gets power. Bill Clinton decided to run for president because he knew exactly what he wanted to do. He knew what the problems were facing America. He had a plan to solve them. And I think people said, gosh, it's time to try something new. What we've been doing isn't getting us where we want to go. We can do better in America, and Bill Clinton and Al Gore represent the opportunity to do just that.
You have the air, this is the second time I've seen you today, you have the air of a man who feels a job has been well done. But there are a lot of people out there who think Governor Clinton's made a lot of promises to a lot of people, and how easy, if he finally pulls it off this evening, is it going to be able to fulfill them?
Well, first, he hasn't done that at all, Peter. I've traveled with him often.
That sounds like retrenchment, Ron Brown.
No, it's not that at all. What it is really the same message for everybody. It's not giving different messages to different constituent groups. That's why he's been a new kind and different kind of Democrat. We're a new and different party. You've got to be able to respond to the times in which you live. If you don't change, you don't deserve the opportunity to lead America. This is a new world. It's a new country. There are different problems, and I think they're new and different solutions, and Bill Clinton offers those new and different solutions.
How is it going to be with the new president if Mr. Clinton wins, and we have not yet decided that?
And there's still millions of Americans still to vote yet, and we shouldn't discourage them from going out.
I say if he wins. He will have to deal with a very heavily new Congress, including a lot of people who don't even know where the U.S. Capitol is. So
but a very heavily new Democratic Congress, probably even more so than before.
You don't know that yet.
But it certainly looks that way. The trends are certainly that way.
We'll see later. We haven't seen that yet. But in any case, with a new president, if Mr. Clinton wins, and 150 or so new members of Congress, how are they going to work and get anything done?
Well, I think one of the things we know for sure, that there was nothing in this campaign to indicate that George Bush's second 4 years would be any different than his first. There was a gridlock. George Bush tried to convince the American people that he was the only president in American history that ever had to work with a Congress of the opposite party. That happens in America all the time. Real leaders break through the gridlock and make it work. Bill Clinton, throughout his political career, has demonstrated he knows how to work with the legislative branch of government. That's one thing you want the President of the United States to be able to do, and I'm confident, as evidently many Americans are, that Bill Clinton is going to be able to make it work, going to be able to break the gridlock and get us back on track again.
Ron Brown, thanks very much, the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, and a man who certainly has every right to feel at this point of the evening he's done well, but he also points to something very important. There's still a lot of time in various parts of the country to vote. There are a lot of propositions out there. In California, for example, there are 2 very important Senate races which have, in many respects, engaged people more than the presidential race has. So we'll be covering that as well as the evening continues. Hope you'll stay with us.
This is the 92 Vote, ABC News continuing coverage of Election Night 92. Once again, David Brinkley and Peter Jennings.
Well, it's 5:30 Pacific time, 7:30 Central time, 8:30 Eastern time. David, things moving very quickly here.
They are. You got, I thought you had something to give us.
I thought you were going to say something. Yes, indeed. We have a couple of more projections to make here now. That the polls have now closed in the state of Arkansas. Governor Clinton has won in Arkansas with its 6 electoral votes. The last time a presidential candidate did not carry his home state was 72 when George McGovern failed to carry South Dakota, but Arkansas last voted for a Democrat in 1976, Jimmy Carter. We also now project that in South Carolina, which has been too close to call for some time, that President Bush is the winner there. South Carolina voted Republican 6 of the last 8 elections, so the president is holding that particular part of the South. And we now also project that President Bush has won in the state of Oklahoma as well, with its 8 electoral votes there. Oklahoma has voted Republican in 9 of the last 10 elections. And if you'll just sit on that board for just a second, I'll just run down, by the remote chance you've just joined us, or if you've just joined us, who has won what at this point. As of now, we project that Governor Clinton has won Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Jersey, big battleground state, Pennsylvania, Maryland, West Virginia, Kentucky, Michigan, Illinois, Missouri, Georgia, and the District of Columbia. For 164 electoral votes, President Bush, we now project, has won in Indiana, Dan Quayle's home state, and in Oklahoma, and add to that South Carolina. David.
When last we met here, the John Glenn race in Ohio was too close to call. We have now decided we have enough votes in and have had time to count them, and we projected John Glenn, the Democratic senator, has been re-elected in Ohio. An interesting small point here is that no Republican has ever been elected president without winning Ohio. John Glenn is the winner. He was the first man to orbit the Earth. We have one other projection from Arkansas, where they have a tradition of electing the same people over and over. Bill Clinton has been governor forever. They had Joseph T. Robinson, John McClellan, and now Dale Bumpers, who is running to serve in the Senate 30 years. He's already been there 24. He is running for a 5th term, and he has won it. Dale Bumpers won again in Arkansas.
Okay, I want to go now to Texas, David, to Austin, Texas, where Governor Ann Richards, who's the Democratic governor of Texas, is going to join us this evening. Good evening, Governor.
How are you?
You've got a lot of interesting stories down there tonight, one of which is the state's too close to call. Give us some sense of how it's going.
No, Peter. We're going to win Texas tonight. It's a whole new story in Texas. I think we're going to win by 2 points. And the amount of money that was put in here by Bush, that was all negative campaigning on the television. And the fact that we're going to win this state shows that this state is not only willing to move to the Democratic column, but we are ready for a change in Washington, D.C.
Okay, Governor, that is yet to be seen. Let's take a look at the popular vote in your state. Perhaps you'd like to look at the television screen with us.
Okay.
With 4%, what is it, 4% of the precincts reporting President Bush and Governor Clinton have 41% each. Ross Perot has 18%. Did you think Ross Perot might do better than he's done, at least so far?
No, I didn't, Peter. But I think he will do better than that 18%. I think he may run as high as 20 or 22. Perot had a great deal of appeal to Texans because he is a Texan. And I think that we can thank Ross for seriously injecting issues into this campaign and focusing the people's attention on those issues. And I was real proud of him for that.
Governor, President Bush has said in private, I don't think he's ever said it in public, but it's nothing secret, said if he lost the election, he would divide his time 50% in Maine and 50% in Texas. How would you feel about having them there? Would he be welcome? Would you be nice to him?
We would love to have George and Barbara Bush in Texas. They got a son here who has a baseball team here. We are always recruiting people to come and spend their money in Texas to improve the economy.
Okay.
Governor, what do you think the future is of Ross Perot? You've been particularly polite about him throughout this campaign. You're not usually polite about other politicians or journalists.
Well, sometimes I am. I like Ross. I know him, and I think he was very serious about wanting to do something for the country. I just think that it's extremely difficult for a third-party candidate to be able to be elected president. It just takes too much organization, too much effort, and too much money, and you just can't do it on the television.
And just
I tell you what I think you're seeing tonight across the country, if I may.
What?
I think you're seeing a real reflection, David, for the first time, of a realization on the part of the people that there's a new Democratic Party. They're not dealing with that same old Democratic Party. They're dealing with new leadership that is aggressive and keeps its eye on the dollar, and at the same time is willing to assume the difficult positions necessary to lead the country.
Is the old Democratic Party of tax and spend gone?
I don't think you're going to see it anymore. You'll hear from it from the Republicans, but that's it.
I have one last question for you, Governor. You've had this extended period in Texas where people had an opportunity to vote over several days. Do you think it has really worked, and is it something you'd recommend for the rest of the country?
We were convinced that if you took the voting opportunity to the voter instead of making them try to come and find you, then you were going to have an opportunity for a high voter turnout. We're going to break all records in the state of Texas. We may vote as high as 80% of the people in my county here in the capital city. It is something every state should do. We should go out and seek the voter and not make the voter try to figure out how to find us. In the long run, democracy depends on our participation.
Governor Richards, thank you very much. In Austin, Texas tonight. Ann Richards, the Democratic governor of Texas. Our popular vote boards here in our studio in New York are now accurate, and with 8% of the precincts nationwide having reported in, President Bush has 43% of the vote. Governor Clinton has 42% of the vote. Ross Perot has 15% of the vote. And so you have a case which was not altogether unanticipated, where President Bush leads in the popular vote as of now, but Governor Clinton leads in the electoral vote. We'll be back in just a minute.
ABC News coverage of the 92 vote will continue. From ABC News, this is the 92 vote. Once again, David Brinkley and Peter Jennings.
You're seeing a crowd in Little Rock, Arkansas tonight. We've already projected that Governor Clinton is going to win his home state, and we now project that he's going to win Tennessee, which is his vice presidential running mate's home state. ABC's Chris Bury told us a little while ago, who's there at the back of the State House, if we can take a look at it again, that there was an enthusiastic crowd building throughout the day at the State House there. That's the projection in Tennessee, and there is the crowd gathering in Little Rock. The first shot we've had of real people in some time, and we'll be going back there a number of times throughout the evening. But we want to go up now to Illinois, where ABC's Bob Jameson is standing by at the headquarters of Carol Moseley Brown, who we have projected is going to win the Senate race in Illinois. She's the Democratic candidate. Bob, go ahead.
Peter, we have the vanguard of what's going to be a noisy celebration here this evening, but it's not going to be the kind of emotional night that there was on primary night in March, when Carol Moseley Braun scored her stunning victory over Democratic incumbent Senator Alan J. Dixon. Too much has happened in the intervening months. While history will indeed be made here this evening, her victory tonight, if indeed it is as projected, will be the result of traditional politics. During the primary campaign, she got the support of white Republican women because she was a heroine, a symbol of the anger over the confirmation hearings of Clarence Thomas and the charges of sexual harassment by Anita Hill. But a lot of that has disappeared during the last several weeks, as her Republican challenger, Rich Williamson, has made a great deal over charges that she is just another Democratic politician in the state of Illinois, her mishandling of her mother's inheritance, Medicaid payments, and other ethics charges. And so her victory tonight will be the result of a straight ticket vote by Democrats throughout the state.
Bob, do I recall that Rich, I apologize if I've got this wrong, though, that Rich Williamson was something of a sacrificial lamb because he was running against Senator Dixon, who was seen to be unassailable at one point, right?
That is indeed correct. That is indeed correct. And in fact, Carol Moseley Braun just several weeks ago seemed to have an unassailable lead of 38 points in the public opinion polls. But Rich Williamson's negative ads and attacks on Carol Moseley Braun have had a devastating effect, and so that she just plummeted precipitously in the polls during the last several weeks.
Okay, Bob, thanks very much. Please let us know when she shows up. ABC's Bob Jamieson at Carol Moseley Braun's headquarters in Chicago in Illinois, which brings us again for the umpteenth time to this question of the year of the woman. The umpteenth year of the woman, some people would argue. Lynn, sure, how have women done tonight so far?
Well, Peter, as you mentioned, Carol Moseley Braun is the one we know. You mentioned earlier that, or David mentioned that Bob Dole, Senator Bob Dole, had won his election. Gloria Odell, of course, losing in Kansas. But with Carol Moseley Braun, I wanted to tell you what we've seen from the exit poll, this issue about this $28,000 check of her mother's that she may have mishandled. Half of our voters in Illinois said that they doubted Carol Moseley Braun's honesty, but a third of them voted for her anyway. So she really was strong enough to overcome all of those kinds of things. Now let's see what some other voters had to say, which tells us also what other women are going to face. In the Illinois Senate race, women voted for Carol Moseley Braun in big numbers, 59% of them. Only 41% of the, 41% of the women voted for Rich Williamson. Now keep the 59% in your mind, and let's look at the next graphic. In the Illinois Senate race, how did men vote? 51% of them voted for Carol Moseley Braun, 49% for Williamson. She won both groups. She got 51% of the men, but you'll recall she got 59% of the women. That's called a gender gap. 8 more percentage points of women voted for her. What that means is, for the first time on a national scale, we are seeing women voting for women in large numbers. Okay, let's go to another race, and that is in Michigan, which you have called for Mr. Clinton. We asked Michigan voters whether the debates were important. Of those who said the debates were important, 25% of them voted for George Bush, but 45% voted for Bill Clinton. Now watch this. 30% voted for Ross Perot. You may recall he made a big pitch for the Michigan voters during that debate. This is quite astounding, George Bush coming in third among those who said that debates were important. One more issue we want to take a look at, not an issue of voting group, and that's in New Jersey, which you've called for Bill Clinton. The so-called Bush Democrats from 1988. This year, George Bush only got 31% of those Democrats who voted for him back in 1988. Bill Clinton, on the other hand, got 57% of them. That means these Democrats are coming home to the Democratic Party. As for Ross Perot, he just got about 13% of the Bush Democrats in New Jersey. So once again, we're seeing that George Bush is just not holding on. Now, incidentally, you may be wondering where all these numbers are coming from.
Right out of the table, right?
My little columns are growing out of the table.
Pushing them up.
But the numbers, I want to tell you about the numbers in the data, and part of the answer is Chilton Research Services. They're also part of our own company. We have a live shot now of Chilton. These are the folks out in Radnor, Pennsylvania, a suburb of Philadelphia, and they're tabulating all the data from the exit polls. Chilton interviewers are talking to some 60,000 voters around the country today, and the information that they get goes back to headquarters. It gets relayed to our computers, and then we turn them into the graphics that you see growing out of my desk.
Lynn,
and of course, there'll be lots more, Peter.
Lynn, I know you haven't got a graphic for this at the moment, but I know that you're very interested in it. Overall in the country, Governor Clinton was deemed to have the gender gap in his favor. Is that what you're seeing?
Well, I'll tell you where we're seeing it very strongly, and that's with working women. They represent about a quarter of the electorate tonight in Illinois, Peter, just in one state. And I'm sure this will be reflected nationwide. And what we're seeing is that Governor Clinton is getting almost 60% of their votes. That is a huge number. We're also seeing it, I believe, with working mothers who are, and single mothers who are the lowest end of the economic scale. So the answer is yes, to that extent they are turning out.
Okay, thanks very much. By the way, one more thing about Carol Moseley Braun. She is, as of now, the only African-American in the United States Senate. Let's go to Capitol Hill and talk to Cokie Roberts a little more, Cokie, if we may, about women this year and how women you think are doing, if you can take a look at it overall this evening.
Well, we don't have women's numbers yet, Peter, because we have so many women running all over the country, and we don't yet know because so many of them are running in the West, where, of course, the polls are not yet closed. But we do have a sense of African Americans. As you say, Carol Braun will be the first female African American in the Senate. Now, in taking a look at the House, as we've said, there are 166 Republicans now, 268 Democrats, and that one independent, by the way, Bernie Sanders from Vermont, has been reelected tonight, so he'll still be there in his little white chair. But Right now, out of those numbers, 1 of those Republicans is black and 25 of those Democrats. But tonight, there are 38 Democratic candidates who are African Americans. They are all in totally safe Democratic districts, so we project that none of them will lose. The one Republican who is in the House is in a little bit of a, black Republican is in a little bit of a toss-up situation, so we're not sure that he is going to win. The others are blacks who are running against those safe Democrats, so we expect them to lose. So it is likely that then at the end of this Congress, this election, that there will be 38 or 39 blacks in the House, and some very interesting ones. I just want to mention one. Carrie Meek from Florida, the child of sharecroppers, the grandchild of slaves, 66 years old, a freshman coming to the House of Representatives, a school teacher. She'll be bringing a very different perspective to this institution.
Only in America. Thanks very much, Cokie. Let's go over to the Russell Office Building, to the rotunda over there, where Jim Wooten, who covers the Senate for us tonight. Cokie said Carol Moseley Brown, only African-American woman in the Senate, only African-American, right?
No, there has, at present, yes, Peter, she would be the only African-American in the Senate. She is not the first black American to serve in the Senate. That was Ed Brooke.
Ed Brooke
he was a Republican, and he left several years ago.
Massachusetts, right?
From Massachusetts, yes. But this is a historic building. A lot of history is made here in every session of Congress. I like being around history, and I think Ms. Braun may enjoy making a little history here as well. One of the things that struck me about the Illinois Senate race, which Ms. Moseley Braun has won, was how Rich Williamson, her Republican opponent, was running away from President Bush. He also could read the handwriting on the wall. There you see some of the raw vote totals. That's just with a small percentage of the precincts reporting, probably doesn't reflect anything in the raw vote. Rich Williamson was not the only one who was running away from the president rather than running with him. If you go up and look at New York now, which is a Senate race we've decided is still much too close to call, between State Attorney General Robert Abrams and Senator Al D'Amato. D'Amato is putting out radio ads which say, gee, it's okay to split your ticket. And he even has former Mayor Ed Koch, a Democrat, who has endorsed D'Amato, saying, I'm voting for Bill Clinton and for Senator Al D'Amato. The same is probably true in Pennsylvania, which is another race where you have a woman candidate, and also a race where it's too close to call. Senator Arlen Specter, who's looking for a third term there as a Republican, has made it clear as often as possible that he is proud of the fact that he has voted to override several George Bush vetoes and that he operates independent of the White House in all that he does. It's that kind of year. The survivors, or those who hope to survive and are smart enough to survive, have tried to stay away from President Bush rather than try to ride his non-existent coattails in those states.
Jim, with the election, or with our projection, I should say, of Ms. Braun, the Democrats move one. They're trying to make themselves filibuster-proof up there tonight. What'll that take?
Well, as a matter of fact, Peter, we've called 13 races now, three Republicans and 10 Democrats, and there have been no switches and no surprises at all. That seat belonged to Alan Dixon, Ms. Braun's seat that she has just won. She defeated him in the primary. So there have been no switches at all. It's 57-43 as of the moment. There are about 14 seats where the races are still in question. Peter?
Okay, Jim, thanks very much. We'll be back to that. But it is what they're trying to do is get to 60.
So they can cut off filibuster.
So they can cut off...
That'd be a very small benefit. Very small benefit. It doesn't happen that much. You got... They can't stop a filibuster now, but there hasn't been one of any consequence except for Al D'Amato, who filibustered to save some jobs in a plant that wanted to move out of New York State, and he succeeded, I gather.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to cut away now again for another opportunity to talk to our local stations around the country, those who want to bring you up to date on local events. If not, you can stay with us, and we'll continue with the national results, but if not, we'll be back in about 10 minutes. Good evening. Welcome back to our coverage of Election 92. Some of it is fairly obvious. Some of it is still too close to call. But let's take a look at the popular vote first of all. The popular vote, which we now have up on our board with 15% of the precincts reporting in shows Governor Clinton now ahead in the popular vote. 7,428,000, 43%. President Bush, 7,112,000, almost 113,000, 41% of the vote. And Ross Perot still hovering about 16%. Ross Perot, as I think you know, has not won any state. And here's the status of the electoral vote as of the moment, with 270 needed. Governor Clinton has 238, President Bush has 46, and Ross Perot has none. Now, there are some states still which are still much too close to call, and I'm just going to run through them for you to tell you that, give you some indication. In some states, it really is to and fro. Texas, with its 32 electoral votes, is still too close to call. Florida, big battleground state. Wisconsin, still too close to call. Alabama, Louisiana, still too close to call. Arizona, too close to call, which President Bush won 4 years ago with 60% of the vote to 38% for Dukakis. Mississippi is still too close to call, as is Kansas, very traditional Republican state. North Dakota, only voting Democratic once since 1940, is too close to call. South Dakota is too close to call, and so is Wyoming, too close to call. And I think now we can go to Houston, where our White House correspondent of long-standing, Britt Hume, has actually had a chance to talk to somebody, at least either in or close to the first family, Britt.
Well, the word we have is from Fred Malek, who, as you know, Peter, is one of the president's senior campaign advisors, one of his top campaign managers. And he said that the president has known since early afternoon, when the exit poll information that the networks had but did not broadcast began to become known. It always becomes known to the campaign officials that the polls were not going to be wrong this time, and that it was going to be worse than he expected, and that he's known that all afternoon and evening. He has remained in a good humor nonetheless. They say he's sitting in his suite now, that he is gracious and in good spirits. He's expected here about 11 o'clock. I think that would be 11 o'clock Eastern time, 11 o'clock your time. Peter, the other thing that Malek said, which I think is of some interest, is that the Bush campaign officials believe that the surge in the polls that they had seen ended on the same day as the Iran-Contra indictment of Caspar Weinberger, which you know was basically a re-indictment, and the release of the full text of a note about which we had known for some time, but the text of which we had not seen. There is some bitterness, I should tell you, among a number of Bush campaign officials that I've talked to about the news play that was given that note, since its contents, if not its exact wording, had been known for some time, and a considerable feeling that the president was really gigged on that, since in their view there was nothing new in it, and he had to go through another 24 to 36 hours of questioning, which the feeling is broke his momentum.
Okay, Britt, thanks very much. I must confess, David, that does remind me of what Lynn Sherr said earlier. Lynn, help us again. Lynn Sherr?
Yes, Peter.
Help us, if you would, on the statistics about whether people believed Governor Clinton on the subject of the draft and whether they believed the president on Iran-Contra. How did those figures work out? Do you remember?
Yeah, I don't have them exactly in my head, but I think it was something like 50-some% did not believe that Mr. Clinton, Governor Clinton, was telling the truth on the draft, but 60-some% did not believe that President Bush was telling the truth on Iran-Contra. So you asked earlier about the character question. The answer is people do care about these. When they care about them, they have very strong feelings. But these were not high issues in terms of why they voted for the candidates. And in this particular one that President Bush made a really big deal about in terms of the draft, he did worse than Governor Clinton did in terms of the honesty issue.
Okay, thanks very much, Lynn. Just to add to that point that Britt had made, that they're bitter in the campaign. You have a projection, David?
I do. From Georgia, it was too close to call. It is no longer. We now project that the winner is Wyche Fowler, the freshman senator seeking a second term, and has won it. He, like many others, he was accused of being involved in some kind of S&L scandal. It seems about a fourth of the Congress was. But he survived it. He has won a new term, and he will begin it in January. Peter?
Okay. David, and just also we're going to continue our look behind the scenes. Go to Little Rock now, because joining us is our colleague Ted Koppel. Ted, you've spent the last how many hours with Governor Clinton?
Well, Peter, I was just thinking about it. Back in 1964, when you and I first became friends, we were covering the Goldwater campaign together. And you remember that last manic day when Senator Goldwater began in Pennsylvania and ended in Arizona. He had nothing on Governor Clinton. Governor Clinton covered 9 states in a campaign sweep that began also in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia at about 6:30 in the morning and ended here this morning in Little Rock at about 10 o'clock Central Time, and we have been going ever since. So it's been a long day, but also a fascinating day, because while we've been looking behind the scenes on what's been happening on the campaign plane itself, some of my colleagues, producers, camera crews, have been in the battle room of the Clinton headquarters here in Little Rock, and we're going to be pulling all of that together. I must tell you, having just heard Britt Hume's report and the mood down there in Texas, you've got exactly the antithesis here. We were trying to get through the crowds, and one helpful policeman said to me, if you can make it through that crowd, you and the good Lord have a lot in common. The crowds are absolutely incredible. We're going to be doing that background on what's been going on inside the campaign during the last 48 hours, inside the Clinton campaign, tomorrow night at 8 o'clock, Peter.
Well, give us a hint, Ted, because you've been out with Governor Clinton a couple of times this year. I think when he was here in New York, you spent a whole day with him. Nancy Gabriner, one of our political researchers, was saying a few minutes ago they might have to put a straitjacket on him tomorrow to stop him from shaking hands. Have the last 36 hours been as energetic as they were many months ago?
It's absolutely phenomenal, because what happens with this man is he's definitely a night person. I can tell you, he had one of his liveliest appearances in New Mexico last night, 3 o'clock in the morning, 10,000 people, 40-degree temperatures. And when we left Philadelphia at 7, there was some question as to whether his voice would hold out. By the time he got to Denver, Colorado at dawn this morning, the voice sounded just fine, thank you very much. He just seems to draw enormous energy from the crowds, and he's got the crowds here to give him that energy tonight. Peter?
Okay, thanks very much, Ted. Remind people that's Behind the Scenes with Bill Clinton tomorrow night at 8 o'clock on ABC. And it does. Koppel's taken us back to 1964 when he and I first met, but taking us back to New Hampshire when we first watched Governor Clinton campaign. There is this just astonishing energy as long as he is in the general neighborhood of people. Occasionally the cynics would think at the time of the debates that he would stay in the room because he knew those of us at the networks rather like to have a photograph of something going on in the room as we talked about the debates. The truth of the matter was he often stayed long after we'd left. We'll be back in just 1 second.
From our Election Night Command Center in New York, ABC News coverage of the 92 vote will continue in a moment. From ABC News, this is continuing coverage of the 92 vote. Once again, David Brinkley and Peter Jennings.
Well, I must confess that some of us think that this next few minutes is an important piece of business, not just for us, but for the country. I want to read you two things, if I may. One is a poll done by the Idaho Statesman several days ago. The question was asked as follows: should the media withhold election results or projected winners on Election Day until the polls close in the West, David? The answer was yes, 94%. I also had a letter from a woman named Ginny Manning in Rochester, Washington the other day who said, please don't take our votes away from us again, as the networks did in 1980. It gives us, living west of the Mississippi, the feeling that our vote does not count, and that is not fair. Joining us tonight from Portland, Oregon, is Congressman Ron Wyden. He represents East Portland, if I'm not mistaken, Congressman?
That's right.
And you've been one of the leaders in saying that we're doing it all wrong, so have a go.
Well, I think citizens out west, Peter, just want to make sure that their vote counts. And when you all call the race, announce it's over before we're done voting, that diminishes the importance of the democratic process here in the West.
How does it diminish the process, do you think?
Well, what we saw in 1988, for example, when the race was called a little bit before 6:30 in the West, voter turnout dropped by about 50% in the 7 to 8 p.m. hour. So it's clear that many people who were voting during the 6 to 7 p.m. hour were excited, but after 7 p.m. when the results were announced, when in the East it was proclaimed as being over, voters stayed home.
Would I be fair in saying, Congressman, that the number of studies done after the fact have been differently interpreted by people like you and people like us, and that it isn't just necessarily self-interest that drives us?
The Committee for the Study of the American Electorate has found that every study indicates a drop-off in voter turnout if the polls are still open another hour or two. But I think those results in Oregon in 1988 were very conclusive. And the irony, of course, Peter, is that the networks don't seem to have any qualms about holding off and announcing sports results when they can show a taped program later on to attract advertisers. We think it's in the public interest for the networks to show a little bit more restraint when it comes to announcing whether an election is over.
As you know, it's not my role nor my intention here to pick a fight with you tonight. I'm interested in the fact I'm interested in the fact that this year in California, people seem more interested in the Senate races than they were necessarily in the presidential race. And a lot of people, including in your own state, are vitally interested in some of the propositions on the ballot. Do you still think the vote is going to continue to be low with that kind of intense interest in other issues?
There is tremendous interest in those Senate races and local races, and we are hoping for a voter turnout. But if even a few people stay home, that could make a difference. For example, in 1980, 1984, 1988, something like 30 Western races were decided by 3 percentage points. Also, we just want to make sure that we have the highest possible turnout, and we think that our networks here on a regional basis holding off will help as well.
Mr. Wyden, everyone I know who has studied this problem carefully has concluded that the easiest and best solution would be to have all the polls across the country close at the same time, such as 7 o'clock in California and progressively in the East. The House of Representatives, of which you remember, has voted 3 times to make that change. The Senate has dawdled around and for no reason we can discover has done nothing about it. Why don't you talk to your friends in the Senate?
David, you're right in saying that a uniform poll closing bill is a good approach, but at the same time, uniform poll closing involves lots of cost, lots of inconvenience for the local governments and the states. I support uniform poll closing and voted for it, but just a little bit more voluntary restraint, I think, could really attack this problem. That's what we're asking for, and my sense is that the progress of Western civilization isn't going to be damaged much if you all just hold off a little bit longer until we're done voting. Okay, Congressman Wyden, I hope you feel you've had a fair shot at this evening. You've been very fair. Okay, thank you very much for joining us. It will be asked, of course, as to why 75% of the country should be kept in the dark while people in the West are still wait to vote. But rather than even get any deeper into that, we've been talking to Jeff Greenfield here a while ago. You were talking to some congressmen in California. It's often said that this hurts and this complaint comes from the losers. Right. You're getting some complaints from the apparent or the seeming winners tonight. This is the conundrum of this. In 1980, there were 2 powerful congressmen, Democrats, who lost after we all projected Reagan the winner. Tonight I talked to Vic Fazio, chairman of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, who is himself in a tough race. He is worried that if Bill Clinton were to win and we were to project that too early, the Democrats, feeling, okay, our guys won, would stay home, and he's worried about the turnout. There's a big turnout in California. There are long lines at the polls. So he's saying, if you project, the winners will stay home. That's always been the mystery about this. Who stays home? The people who feel their candidate has lost and it's not worth going out, or the people who feel they've won? In Oregon, there's a very close Senate race between Les Aucoin and Senator Packwood. There are 2 Senate races in California. There's a very exciting Senate race in Washington. And I think however difficult this is, until we adopt, I think, a 24-hour voting day, because you don't want to penalize late workers in California. Open the polls from midnight to midnight everywhere, you know, and close them at exactly the same time, and we won't project, and that solves the dilemma. Costs a little money. The debate will certainly continue. Thanks, Jeff, and again, our thanks to Congressman Wyden for making that pitch on behalf of a lot of people who've written us and who've expressed themselves in various polls to various newspapers, which I suppose leads us not illogically to the question of term limitations. So let's ask Cokie Roberts again from Washington. Cokie, you in the Washington, oh, there you are again. You wrote in the Washington Post the other day a very passionate defense of not having term limitations. Have you had a chance to get some feel as to how you think it'll play in the country tonight?
Oh, I think the country is passionately for term limitations. I think that's totally fair to say. There are 14 states where some form of term limitations for members of Congress are on the ballot. They vary considerably, anywhere from two terms to 6 terms. And in the states right now, Michigan, Missouri, Florida, Ohio, that term limitation provision referendum has won. and it is leading in North Dakota and Nebraska, and I suspect it'll win every place. There's a lot of question about the constitutionality of it, and that what that means is that there will be a movement in the Congress if the court says that all of these individual states do not have the right to limit the terms of the members of Congress, that then there'll be a movement in Congress to pass a constitutional amendment for term limits. And a very interesting fact there, Peter, in going through these congressional races, race by race, I noticed that an awful lot of the new Democrats who are running on a term limitation platform, as well as a lot of the Republicans. It could be very tough for the Democratic leadership faced with this new Congress.
I think as certainly the political aficionados in the country know, you're the daughter of a politician. You've argued against...
Of two politicians.
I beg your pardon, if you're quite right, of two politicians. You've argued against it because you said the vote was enough. George Will is also with us in Washington tonight. And George, will you join us for a second? You've written a book this year on the subject of term limitations. You're all in favor of it.
I am, Peter. I didn't used to be, and I changed my mind. It's interesting to me that, as Cokie says, a lot of people are getting into office this year by committing themselves to term limits. What that means is that it will be more difficult for the Congress to bottle up, as they have in the past, say in the Judiciary Committee of the House, a constitutional amendment limiting terms. It would be more likely to get a discharge petition, to get it out on the floor, and once you get it to a floor, it's apt to pass. All over the country, Peter, all regions, both parties, both sexes, all ethnic groups favor term limits. Tonight, 14 states, with a third of the American population, 4 of the states are quite big. They're Michigan, Ohio, Florida, and California. This is the closest thing we've ever had to a national referendum on a particular issue. And it's I think, going to pass very strongly indeed.
I think we had a national referendum on prohibition, and that it was probably an equally good idea.
Say again, Cokie?
We had a national referendum on prohibition, and it was probably an equally good idea.
Your argument, Cokie, is that we get a chance every couple of years to vote the vote, so that's term limitation in itself, right?
And in fact, we are going to see by the end of tonight at least a fourth of the House of Representatives turned over, and maybe more. So I think that the idea that you cannot retain effective representatives is taking away a democratic moment of ours.
Cokie or George or both, there is always the question of constitutionality. Does a state have the right to say that a senator may only serve 1 term or 2 terms or whatever? That'll have to go to the Supreme Court in any case, won't it?
Yes, it will.
It definitely is an unsettled area of the law. The question is, are the states adding a 4th qualification? If they are, it's unconstitutional. There are, however, other ways of justifying this.
So you think it need not go to the Supreme Court?
I think it will go to the court. I don't think you can presume the outcome.
George, do you think in any other political climate it would have had any success?
I think so. I think strength has been building all along, and what's going to happen, Peter, is that you're going to see more and more state legislatures brought under term limits, and Congress will begin to look illegitimate.
On the other hand, the more that happens, all those state legislators will be running for Congress, so there'll be very tightly contested congressional seats anyway.
Okay, thank you both very much. I wanted to touch on that this evening and may touch on that again before we even leave this evening when we get the results of a number, 14 states, I think Cokie said, term limitations are on the ballot somewhere. Take a quick look here at Senator Albert Gore of Tennessee. Managed to hold the state for his Democratic ticket here. There he and his family watching television this evening. A man who was chosen by Bill Clinton, his wife Tipper, in order to help them make inroads into what has been heretofore the Republican South at the presidential and vice presidential level. We're going to go away now and let our local stations bring you up to date on local events. If you want to stay with us, we'll keep up the national story. David and I'll be back shortly. Let's do that right now. With 35% of the precincts reporting in, a little more than 6 million people in his camp. Question is, will it be enough for him? How will he want to stay in the political arena? He hasn't always enjoyed the ruffle and tumble of politics. But he has certainly enjoyed the attention he has had from the crowd. Question is, will he have had enough? Will he want to go back to business? There's been some suggestion even from Governor Clinton that he might want Ross Perot involved in some way in a government. At least he said that before tonight. Just before he starts, we project Alabama for President Bush. Alabama for President Bush, 9 electoral votes. Been too close to call for much of the evening.
About 5 minutes.
We now project.
Now then, Ed, these are the people that did it all. And as we said at the rally the other day, the perfect song for them is when the Saints go marching in. That's all.
Well, as Mort Dean, our correspondent who covers Mr. Perot, said the other day, he's part entrepreneur, part entertainer, part showman. He's taken to calling out to the band at every opportunity the song or the number that he likes. And tonight, for all of his volunteers, paid and otherwise, in Dallas, when the Saints go marching in. The other day, in reference to the press, he had them play Crazy. In about 15 seconds from now, if our local stations want to cut away, by all means, do so. Bring your local folk up to speed on the local results. We're going to stay with this. That's the electoral vote as it stands right now. 254 for Clinton, 64 for George Bush, and none for Ross Perot. It has been so hard to divine what it would be or what it would take to keep Ross Perot actively politically involved. Some people said 18 or 19%. There'd be a potential for him to go on and be a force in 96. He said, let's hear another theme song here.
Okay. Is this the end or is this just the beginning? Okay. As all of you know, you call the shots, you're the boss, right? Okay. Whatever you want is fine, but now just having said that, Ed, you got to play our campaign theme song, Crazy. Okay? There we go. Crazy.
Like Guy Lombardo and his Royal Canadians, the Crazy. This is the song, the campaign song, as he said.
The other day he was speaking disparagingly of Lawrence Welk. He kept saying, this is not Lawrence Welk music.
How dare he speak disparagingly of Lawrence Welk. But you know, David, we were just a couple weeks ago, we were out doing the broadcast World News Tonight in Michigan, and about 200 or 300 of Ross Perot supporters came and stood quietly by. And so many of them felt there, as so many people in other parts of the country did, that nobody else represented them as well as this man did. And you heard it from Governor Ann Richards in Texas tonight, and you've heard it from Bill Clinton and George Bush, too. Ross Perot did an enormous amount this year to engage people in the political process. And his voters were deemed so important that neither George Bush nor Bill Clinton was really keen to take him on.
Well, he's got 6.5 million votes so far, and that's about a third of the country.
I didn't say it was Guy Lombardo. I get a lot of pastor on it. Crazy is country music. Crazy is the late Patsy Cline.
Would you like to have a commentary from George Will on this scene laid out before us?
No, but I'd like to hear from Sam Donaldson, that we haven't heard from in a while. Good evening, Sam.
Hello, Peter.
Observations to get you going?
Well, if our numbers are correct, Ross Perot, having spent about $65 million and gotten about 6,500,000 votes so far, it's about $10 a vote. Some estimates say he'll spend $100 million when they tote up all of the expenditures. That's a lot of money,
And I suppose that that's part of the payoff. Well, here he is.
To putting this country back to work? Anything more important than making the words "Made in the USA" the world standard for excellence? Anything more important than passing on the American dream to your children? Anything more important than having the people in this country be the bosses and own the country? Okay, well, we'll keep on going as long as you want to keep on going. I really don't like this, but there's still time to kill, so Ed, how about way down yonder in New Orleans? That's where the voodoo comes from.
Well, why don't we let them play way down yonder in New Orleans, and why don't we cut away to Washington for just a moment and talk to George Will and Sam Donaldson. There's Admiral Stockdale, by the way, his vice presidential candidate. Hero of Vietnam. Not very happy on the political campaign at all. A scholar out at the Hoover Institute, Stanford University in California. I'd like to bring in both George Will and Sam Donaldson in Washington now and ask you both. Sam, let me start with you again. What influence do you think Ross Perot really will have in Washington in the next 4 years?
Well, I don't think it's going to have a lot of influence in a Clinton administration, assuming Governor Clinton wins the election, and it appears that he's going to do that. I mean, Ross Perot is someone who has used Washington as a contract. He's gotten his start in business by doing government contracts here. He's had interaction with Republican administrations, but not particularly with Democratic administrations. So I don't think Governor Clinton's going to call him up and say, well, Ross, we need you to come here and just tell us how simple it is and get it done.
Well, do you think the Governor Clinton was serious when he suggested that he might want Ross Perot involved in some way, or was he just courting his voters?
Well, you know, you can involve someone by making them head of a commission. The commission to solve a general problem and study it for 4 years. And Ross, well, you had that up. He could do something like that. But I don't know what job in the administration Ross Perot would want to begin with. And I don't know what job of any importance that Governor Clinton would entrust him with.
George Will, your observations, and where do you think Ross Perot fits in over the next 4 years?
I think he disappears, Peter. I think this is political cotton candy. It's spun sugar, a little color, and mostly air, and no nutrition to it. There's very little staying power to this. His principal contribution to American politics this year is to guarantee, and Bill Clinton knows this, is to guarantee that Bill Clinton is a merely plurality president, not a majority president. That is, most of the people who went to the polls today and voted for president are voting against the next president, probably in all probability, Mr. Clinton. Now, Mr. Clinton's not going to feel a deep gratitude to the man who brought this about. We should say, however, that you can be a plurality president and still be a very powerful president. Abraham Lincoln got 39% of the votes and was a powerful president. Woodrow Wilson in 1912 got 41% of the votes and was a powerful president.
Harry Truman.
Bill Clinton, Harry Truman, indeed. Richard Nixon got 43% in 1968. But Bill Clinton, cold-eyed, will look in the morning and say, who is it held me under 50%? It wasn't just George Bush, it was this man in Texas, and I don't think Clinton will want to see hide or hair of him again ever.
Okay, George, thank you very much. Let's go back to Dallas. He's now going to speak. We think he was waiting for the local cutaways to win.
Well, now, wait just a minute. First thing we want to do, we'll be talking about this in a minute. First thing we want to do is all team up together and try to make it work now, right? Absolutely. If you're not too happy, we can make some changes in '94, right? But that's the main thing now. Time is precious. We don't want to waste a minute. Let's try to make it work. And it takes us all working together to make it work. I'll be talking about that in a minute. So we've got work to do starting right away because our country needs all of our help. Okay. Hey. I want to thank all of you who are here tonight and all the people who have come together across the nation. Starting last February, you did something that everybody said couldn't be done. Millions of you came together to take your country back. You gave Washington a laser-like message to listen to the people. You have done an incredible job of getting this country turned back around to the type country our founders established, a country that came from the people. And you have changed this country through your massive efforts. And I compliment you for it, and it was brilliant the way you did it. As I've said on a number of occasions, my role in life is that of the grain of sand to the oyster. It irritates the oyster and out comes a pearl. I have been your grain of sand that you chose. It has been an honor to be your grain of sand in this process, and we will continue to work together to make pearls as necessary in the future. Fair enough? Great. The American people have spoken. They have chosen Governor Clinton. Congratulations. Wait a minute. No. Whoop. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. The only way we're going to make it work if all team up together. So let's give Governor Clinton a big round of applause. He's won. Thank you. Now, let's forget the election. Forget the election, it's behind us. The hard work is in front of us, and we must all work together to rebuild our great country. Thank you. You, the American people, are the greatest people on the face of the earth. And if we will just put our differences aside and team up together, we can rebuild our job base. We can eliminate the deficit. We can eliminate the debt, and most importantly, we can pass on the American dream to our children, right? And on the way, we can reform our government and get rid of some of these problems that are so damaging to all of us. Now, to the millions of volunteers who asked me to serve as your candidate, as long as I live, one of the happiest memories of my life will be the memory of working with you. That memory will never dim. It's the nicest honor I will ever receive in my life. Thank you very much.
Let it be recorded that Ross Perot called the election this year. He said it was Bill Clinton who'd won. We'll project Wisconsin for Clinton and 11 electoral votes, which puts him just a few shy of the 270 he needs. And there's a victor in the Wisconsin Senate.
In the Senate, Russell Feingold, who challenged Bob Caston, the incumbent, used all kinds of funny commercials, including one with...
He survived a primary vote, David,
well, he did, yes.
in which his two other competitors were so nasty to one another, he emerged. Then he used Elvis Presley, right?
He used Elvis Presley, whose political thoughts are not found in our computer, so I don't know what he is. Anyway, Feingold is a winner in Wisconsin, a Democrat. That's the first incumbent to lose, Caston in Wisconsin. All incumbents so far have been reelected.
No, it's just the beginning, but the next step is we need to take all of our energy and harness it and try. See, time is not our friend. Time is our enemy. These problems our country faces need to be solved immediately. We need to all work together and work with the new administration and give it a world-class best effort to get these problems solved now. Because if we do, you benefit, the country benefits, your children benefits, and everybody wins. We've got to do it. Spend about 10 minutes getting over being frustrated that your candidate didn't win. Then take all of this enormous creativity and talent that you have displayed, and let's make our country work at the national, state, county, city, local, and neighborhood level, and at every single school across the country, right? Absolutely.
To his credit, as he so often does, Ross Perot says to his supporters when he announces that Bill Clinton has won the election, he hears some boos in there. He says, that's not what we want to hear. He thinks the country needs to pull together. He has always from the outset said that there was it was very important for the country to take some strong medicine in order to see bright times on what he regarded as a distant horizon. And again, he says that tonight he's enjoyed being the grain in the sand to the oyster, out of which he hopes will come a pearl, a man who has become quite a phrase maker over the last several months. We'll be right back.
ABC News coverage of the 92 vote will continue after this from our ABC stations.
Hi, I'm Charles Gibson.
And I'm Joan London. Tomorrow on Good Morning America, we'll have complete coverage of Election Day results from all around the country.
Find out who won, who lost. Join us tomorrow on Good Morning America.
Tomorrow, Ted Koppel with the Clintons. In the final hours through Election Day, unprecedented access, intimate conversations. What were they feeling as they crossed the finish line? Behind the scenes with Bill Clinton, an ABC News special tomorrow.
At the Thomas Starr King Junior High School in Los Angeles, they are still voting. The polls don't close out there for about another 20 minutes or so. We're told President Bush is going to be along in about 15 minutes to talk to the nation. Haven't got a hard time on that. There's still lots to vote on in California, those two important Senate races, the physician-assisted death, the euthanasia proposition in California, term limits in California, Proposition 164, one of the 14 states in the nation which has term limits. Also a proposal to strengthen the governor's budget powers, allow him to declare a state of emergency. Up in Oregon, there's the question of homosexual rights. There's a lot to vote on in the western part of the country still, and it is encouraging to those people who have had a glimpse of it at least to see that people are still lining up in various parts of the West Coast to cast their ballot for local issues and for Senate levels and for House races, even though it is becoming increasingly obvious, as Mr. Perot put it just a moment, that the next President of the United States is going to be Bill Clinton. And he is 5 votes short of the 270 electoral votes needed. And David, you have another projection of another incumbent in trouble.
I do. It's in North Carolina. And the winner is Locke Faircloth, who has defeated Terry Sanford, who has been in the Senate. He's a former governor. He was president of Duke University, but in the middle of the campaign, he had to stop and have heart surgery. It took some time to recover, and by the time he was able to get out and campaign again, it apparently was too late. So the winner again is Locke Faircloth, who's a businessman and associated with Jesse Helms and his so-called Congressional Club, which is really a fundraising device for conservatives. Peter?
Just to add to what you said a moment ago, you said of all the incumbents, only one had been defeated. That now makes it 2. Terry Sanford in North Carolina, Bob Caston in Wisconsin. All other incumbents tonight have got through. Runs a bit against the conventional wisdom that this was a throw-the-bums-out year. But as we make our way down to Washington, let's first look at the popular vote overall. With 41% of the precincts reporting nationally, Governor Clinton's up to 44% of the vote. President Bush, 39%, Ross Perot, 17%. Perhaps George Will said it as directly as anybody. Governor Clinton may not be so well disposed to the man, Ross Perot, who so far has denied him a majority of the popular vote. In Washington, Cokie Roberts, how goes it for incumbents in the House, Cokie?
About the same as for the Senate. Now, in the Senate, there are still 4 incumbents whose races are in play, who could still lose tonight. In the House, there are a lot more than that, but so far, as you say, out of the Senate, so far out of 35 candidates, only 2 incumbents have lost. In the House, out of 349 incumbents, only 2 have lost. So very few indeed. Now, we know that at least 4 more have to lose because we have 10 races of incumbents running against incumbents due to redistricting, and one of those is one of the races where one incumbent has already lost. But 141 incumbents have been re-elected to the House already tonight.
I wonder if you're surprised.
I am somewhat surprised, but because that Perot vote is a large enough vote, particularly in some states, that you would think that that some of the people who came out to vote for him just might cast an overwhelming anti-incumbent vote. But so far, we're not seeing that. The incumbents that have been reelected, 85 Democrats, 55 Republicans, so it's still keeping that strong Democratic lead in the House of Representatives.
Cokie, the prediction we were hearing of 100 to 150 new members for one reason or another, does that still look reasonable?
I don't think so. I'd be surprised if we have that number by the time tonight is over. So far, if we had, let's see, I can't do math this fast, but...
We'll do it slowly. There's no great rush.
But I think that we're at about the 90-some mark right now of new members, and so it's likely to climb higher than that, but I think that it's not likely to climb over about 110 at this point.
Let me go through, break it down, and ask you to go through it a bit more slowly, too, because the early projection was many more women. Is that going to be the case? No.
Yes, no, we'll have more women because we do have some open seats. I mean, if you talk about 349 incumbents, that leaves 86 open seats. That's a lot of open seats. And in any seat that's open, you have an equal shot for the two people running, and there are a lot of women running in those seats.
And the other expectation was that the blacks running for Congress would also increase their number.
And they have increased their number. We've talked about that earlier, that the number of blacks has gone up already, and the number of Hispanics has also probably going to increase by at least a few. Right now, the Hispanics in the House of Representatives, there are 10 Democrats, 1 Republican, and now we have 20 Democratic candidates, 11 Republican, and we estimate that at least 13 of those Democrats will win, and at least 2 of those Republicans, maybe more. So that's also an increase of Hispanics, including, I'd like to just point out a couple here, too. One is Lucille Roybal Allard. She is the daughter of Ed Roybal, who's been in Congress for a long time. First time we've had a father-daughter switch in Congress. Really? We've had father-son and we've had mother-son, but we haven't had father-daughter. And also Lincoln Diaz Balart from Florida, a Cuban-American whose grandfather, uncle, and father were all in the Cuban legislature, and whose aunt was once married to Fidel Castro. So he's got quite a family to bring to the United States House of Representatives.
Not for nothing, I said at the beginning, nobody knows the House as well as you. Thanks, Cokie, very much. There's more to come. We'll be right back.
ABC News coverage of the 92 vote, brought to you by Dodge and by the Business Services Division of MCI. ABC News coverage of the 92 vote will continue in a moment.
We're going to make another projection now. We project that Bill Clinton is going to be the next president of the United States. We project that Ohio has gone for Governor Clinton. Let's take a look at the big board. We go from 265 electoral votes up over the 270 number. Bill Clinton is going to be, by our projection, the next president of the United States. There are 31 electoral votes in Ohio. We project 21 electoral votes in Ohio. That is downtown Little Rock. They're hearing the news as well. President Bush won it in 1988. Voted for a Democrat only twice since 1952 has Ohio, and last voted for Jimmy Carter in 1976. So by our projection, at a little before 11 o'clock Eastern Time, just a couple of minutes before the polls close in California, we project that Governor Clinton has gone over the 270 votes he has needed. Just watch Little Rock for just a moment.
Peter, one other little item here. He will be the first in about 50 years to be elected president without winning the primary in New Hampshire, which he did not.
And perhaps more importantly, David, he's the first president from Arkansas. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our coverage. Bill Clinton's going to be the next president of the United States by our projections. And to tell all our local stations around the country, we're going to stay with us now. We're not going to cut away for local reporting, which of course is your call if you wish to. We're also not going to cut away for local news right at this moment. Also your choice. We're going to stay with it because President Bush is expected to show up in downtown Houston in not very long from now and speak to the nation. And it, we suspect, will not be all that long after that Governor Clinton comes out and speaks to the nation as well. Let's take a look at downtown Little Rock and downtown Houston. There's the old State House in Little Rock, where the celebration has simply been building throughout the night.
It exploded a couple of minutes ago when you called Clinton the winner.
And so will begin the long period of analysis. Let's go to Chris Bury, who's standing there. Chris Bury, in Little Rock, can you hear us?
Hello, Peter.
Hi, Chris. Can you go ahead?
Well, as you say, the crowd has been building. When the projections were announced, people started hugging each other, giving each other high fives. Enormous energy, enormous enthusiasm. This is a very young crowd. For many of them, of course, it's the first time they've been involved in a presidential effort. It was exactly 13 months ago today, right here at the old State House, that Bill Clinton announced his candidacy for president. 13 long and very difficult months. This campaign has been bound together by a lot of crises, from the draft stories to various difficult times during the campaign. And there's a great sense of bonding and a great sense of continuity here.
And one might guess, Chris, because you've been with us so long, as a certain suppressed disbelief that it actually happened after such a rocky road for this man.
I think there is enormous relief about that. And this candidacy was written off in New Hampshire. It was almost written off before New York when he lost Connecticut. Even after the convention, there was great skepticism about Bill Clinton in all corners of the country. Time magazine put a cover on why voters don't trust Bill Clinton, and he still managed to overcome so much of that. His campaign managed to overcome that and managed to stick together all along. So I think there's this enormous relief, enormous exuberance here tonight.
Do you have any knowledge, Chris, as to whether Senator Gore is going to come up to Little Rock and join him there this evening, or going to stay down there?
Senator Gore is expected to appear with Governor Clinton. I talked to Governor Clinton's speechwriter tonight, and he expects the governor to thank President Bush for his service to the country. He also expects Governor Clinton to warn voters that it's not going to be easy, that the country got itself into an economic mess over a matter of years, and it's going to take a long time to dig itself out. And I think you're also going to hear a variation of John Kennedy's "Ask not what your country can do for your" theme. I think Governor Clinton is going to ask voters to help him, ask them to pitch in. It's going to be a very cautionary note that none of this is going to be easy, and he's not the miracle man.
Well, we will try not to invoke John F. Kennedy too often, but it is just so obvious that the torch has passed to a new generation, because these are, of course, this is the first president, the first vice president to be born after World War II, David.
Well, Kennedy is the youngest president ever elected, right, and Clinton is the second youngest. So, yes, it's a new generation.
What do you think?
I think it's going to be interesting to see what they do. They're not being given a chocolate soda. It's going to be really tough. Everyone except George Bush, who incidentally had trouble, everyone except George Bush has made the point that it's going to be very rough and very tough to get this country back on its economic equilibrium, beginning with Ross Perot. He made some really tough recommendations. A 50-cent a gallon tax on gasoline and that kind of thing. Clinton has made some of the same, much less objectionable to people than that. But he's going to demand sacrifice, and people will have no choice but to agree.
I don't want to beat it to death, but I am indeed impressed with what George Will said, that Governor Clinton can be, we've caught him a few moments off camera in the course of this campaign. He can be mean as a coot to his staff and very tough and tough-minded. I guess he had to be to stand up this long, but may not be so well disposed towards Ross Perot. he was not as eager as President Bush was in this campaign to take him on. George Bush finally took Ross Perot on much more directly than Bill Clinton did.
After it ceased to make any difference, I think.
Touche. Okay, we're going to come back now and try to, in just a minute, and try to put together who it was that voted for Bill Clinton throughout the country so far. As I say, at this point, we've got 45% of the precincts in the nation reporting. 286 electoral votes so far. That may not be the end of it, as you know, by any means. But we want to try to find out who voted for him and why they voted for him, because therein will lie a measure of his challenge. We'll be right back.
ABC News coverage of the 92 vote will continue after this from our ABC stations.
This is ABC.
From ABC News, this is continuing coverage of Election Night 92. Once again, Peter Jennings.
It's just a couple of minutes before 11 o'clock Eastern Time, and at 11 o'clock Eastern Time, we're going to be in a position to make some important projections on the West Coast. We hope you'll stay with us for that, but that's what the map is looking like at the moment. We have now put Governor Clinton over the top with 286 electoral votes. Pretty certain at the moment that that is not the end of it. We know that in part because the Bush campaign gave up campaigning in California a long time ago, virtually conceded that to Governor Clinton. So we'll see how that goes. And then we're told that both President Bush and Governor Clinton are going to show up fairly soon to talk to the nation. And people like Jeff Greenfield and others can hardly wait. I think you can stand up if you like. You can hardly wait to talk. You were talking as I came over here about Democratic wannabes circling over Little Rock.
I have this image of tragedy. It's a family from Oklahoma City. They stop, they look at a map in Washington, and they're standing in front of the Clinton transition office when the doors open, and they are trampled to death by 1,000 pairs of Ferragamos. You've got 12 years worth of Democrats looking for jobs and influence. They've been stacked up like jets over O'Hare in Chicago on a foggy day, and the pressure on Clinton to staff this administration is going to be his first test.
This was, in some respects, several weeks ago, this was the early sign for us of how this was going to go, wasn't it? Because all the Republicans in Washington went out to the employment agencies and started looking for work.
The resume offices were in overtime, and I have a feeling a lot of people suddenly discovered that they were really close friends of people like George Stephanopoulos and Jim Carville and that whole Clinton staff. But to me, not living in Washington, I live in the heartland of Manhattan, of course. The spectacle of these people trying to ingratiate themselves with the new administration is almost like a tribal ritual that goes on, and particularly for the Democrats now because they've been out of power so long.
I had the dubious privilege today of lunching with you and some of your hardcore political guys. You were projecting stuff down to judgeships.
Not I, but yes, it's true. It's true. Okay. It's part of the game, Peter.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff, very much. Jeff Greenfield, and we'll all be here. In about 20 seconds from now, we'll arrive at 11 o'clock and we'll make the last batch of projections in this election here. Take a look at this board. Ross Perot hasn't won any states. Deep in his heart, as we said earlier on, he really wanted to win Texas. He talked about winning 50. Bill Clinton has won 27 states. George Bush has won 8. It's now 11 o'clock. Watch this map as we make our projections for the West Coast. Let's start, first of all, with California. I don't think it'll come as a great surprise to anybody, but we project that Governor Clinton is the winner in California. It is the great load, the mother load of electoral votes, 54 electoral votes. You know, George Bush only won it by 4 percentage points in 1988. Last voted for a Democrat, 1964 for Lyndon Johnson. Governor Clinton's had a strong lead there ever since the summer. The question of the economy, the defense industry, the jobs were bad there. There was enormous dissatisfaction. We found that even in Orange County, in Southern California, the great sort of bastion of support for Republican presidents, that went away from George Bush as well. We project in the state of Washington that Governor Clinton is also the winner there, 11 electoral votes. Washington has voted Republican in every election between 1972 and 1984, before, mind you, voting for Dukakis in 1988. In Oregon, 7 electoral votes. We project that is going to go for Governor Clinton as well. Voted for Dukakis in 88. But voted Republican in 9 of the previous 11 elections. They both campaigned there on the question of jobs and the environment. You remember the president the other day, President Bush, of course, in what our White House correspondent Britt Hume called his crazy days, saying if you vote for Governor Clinton, you're going to be up to your neck in owls. That issue of jobs and the environment is one of the ones that Governor Clinton is going to have to resolve as president. And let's go out here off the edge of our big board here to Hawaii with its 4 electoral votes. No great surprise. Hawaii's voted Democrat in 6 of the last 8 elections, and we give that to Governor Clinton as well. There are 4 electoral votes. Now let's just take a look at the overall electoral count as of now. There's still some states which are too close to call, Florida and Texas among them, but the overall electoral vote count now is 362 for Governor Clinton. I guess one says President-elect Clinton, and 64 for President Bush, and none for Ross Perot. Now, David, you've got some projections as well.
I have, Peter, and also I want to say to our audience and our station that we are waiting here for President Bush, who is expected to arrive here and speak briefly or otherwise in about 5 minutes. In the meantime, I have a few projections for the U.S. Senate, beginning in California with what they call a long seat, meaning it's a 2-year term. Barbara Boxer, currently a U.S. representative, was elected to represent California in the Senate, defeating Bruce Hershenson. Also in California, which they call a short seat because it's only good for 2 years and then you have to run again, Dianne Feinstein, former mayor of San Francisco. It is a political oddity that the state now is represented by 2 liberal women from the northern end of the state. And Dianne Feinstein, the winner in the short seat.
Can I just explain that short seat? She ran against John Seymour, who was appointed by the governor of California.
Governor who left to go into the Senate.
That's right.
In the state of Washington, the Senate there, Senator Brock Adams is retiring. The winner is Patty Murray, a one-time state senator who calls herself a mom in tennis shoes. She's gone around the state giving away shoelaces with their name printed on them. Anyway, Patty Murray, Democrat, is the winner for the Senate in the state of Washington. And in Hawaii, no surprise, Danny Inouye, has been there forever, 6 terms, was reelected. One remaining projection or lack of projection I have is in Oregon for the Senate. It's too close to call. That's Les Aucoin running against Senator Bob Packwood. We will know the details on that later, and we'll bring them to you then. Now, where do we go?
Well, I'm going to say that Patty Murray, that there's even a little more to the tennis shoes story, as you know, because she went to appeal on an issue to a politician, and the politician said, you're not going to have any influence around here, you're only a woman in tennis shoes. And that, of course, is how that campaign began for her. And I must confess, that is a bit of a surprise. I think Barbara Boxer's election in California is a bit of a surprise,
I thought so, too.
They thought she was in trouble at the end.
Well, she bounced a lot of checks. I've forgotten the number, but it's 100 and something. And also, she was the biggest would-be spender in the Senate. The spending that she voted for, promoted and pushed for, was $604 billion.
You've got it exactly right. Yeah. The National Taxpayers Union voted for that. Yeah, and it was, unlike you, I have to look at the car, 143 overdrafts she had.
Is that it? 143.
That was a very tough race.
But she overcame all of that.
Okay, we'll come back and try to make some more sense of it. And though it may make perfect sense to you already, President Bush and Governor Clinton will be along very shortly.
ABC News coverage of the 92 vote. Brought to you by Dodge. Our coverage of the 92 vote from Election Night Command Center in New York will continue in a moment.
Thursday on Primetime, this hidden camera investigation may forever change the way you shop for food.
The fish smells to high heavens. They soak ham in Clorox to take the smell out of it.
A Primetime investigation, Thursday.
From the ABC News Election Night Command Center in New York, this is the 92 vote. Once again, David Brinkley and Peter Jennings.
It's never just stay with, I was going to say we could stay with that picture for just a second. It gives us a chance to thank our directors and our producers. That's all they have to keep a handle on all around the country and all over the world tonight.
Yeah, that's all they have to do. What are there, 50 pictures there?
Yeah, this broadcast is going to 15 countries, as we said at the beginning of this evening, including across most of Russia. And President Bush has just arrived at the Galleria Hotel in Houston. He's going to show up before his supporters in just a moment. And we're going to go to London for just a moment because we've kept ABC's Pierre Salinger up most of the night. Pierre, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Peter.
Let me read you a little bit of something I wrote down out of one of the European papers today. Tell me if you think it's right. That it was between Clinton's vigor and Bush's continuity that neither man has a convincing plan for dealing with the deficit, but for the rest of the world, contrary to some of the campaign rhetoric, all the signs are of continuity in foreign policy, and neither man is dangerous. Is that the sort of overseas view as you see it?
Not exactly,
Okay.
Peter. I think that as far as the public is concerned, they didn't pay much attention to these elections until about the last week. There's so much crises across Europe and other parts of the world that they were focused on their internal issues. In the governments, however, there was a lot of worry about this election. If you look at governments like this country, Great Britain, France, Germany, the leaders of those countries really wanted George Bush to win. They felt they had something with George Bush. They had worked with him. They didn't know anything about Bill Clinton. They didn't see any foreign policy experience behind Bill Clinton. And so now they're going to have to wake up tomorrow morning and say, well, we've got to deal with a new government and a new country.
And yet my understanding is, Pierre, that they have indeed sent various emissaries here to talk to at least the people around Governor Clinton so they know to some extent what they're getting, right?
That's right. And also, as you know, the Clinton campaign sent some emissaries themselves to some European countries to meet with leaders. And I know that Governor Clinton wants to establish very good relations with Europe as he sees the necessity of a backbone between Europe and the United States to solve some of these world problems that we're facing. I think that the interesting thing, however, is that in this last week there was an enormous interest in the election. And tonight, millions of people across Europe watched this election return. Here at this dinner we had at the Meridian Hotel, it was fantastic because we had people of all kinds of different views, and they watched until late into the night.
Let me ask you, moreover, they like you. Let me ask you a couple specific questions. Governor Clinton has been tougher than President Bush has been on some measure of intervention in the former Yugoslavia. In Bosnia-Herzegovina, the Europeans have been dragging their feet. Are they afraid he's going to be tougher on them?
Well, of course, that's a very, very important issue because I think neither the European community nor the United States did the right thing in dealing with the Yugoslavia problem. And I think that here in Europe now they are beginning to believe that intervention is more necessary than it was in the past. And Clinton's position is on that line, and I think they accept that position.
And just very quickly, Pierre, because we've only got about 30 seconds before the president shows up, what do they think the president-elect Bill Clinton is likely to do about the chaos in Russia and the other former Soviet republics? What do they think he can do?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't think that they have any judgment on that at the moment. I think that Clinton is going to have to make some kind of demonstration. Obviously, he has to focus on the internal issues, but he's also going to have to look at the rest of the world, and I think people are looking to see how he looks at that world.
Okay, Pierre, thanks very much. Thanks for staying up. Appreciate it. Pierre Salinger, our chief foreign correspondent, gives us, speaking of domestic issues, to say now that we now project that Kansas is going to go for President Bush, voted Republican in 7 of the last 8 elections, and that Mississippi is also going to go for President Bush, Mississippi with its 7 electoral votes and Kansas with its 6. And in just about a minute or half a minute from now, President Bush is going to show up to his supporters. So let's simply go down and sit on the picture at the Galleria in Houston, that hotel down there, with our White House correspondent, Brit Hume, who has traveled so many miles with this man. There's his spokesman, Marlon Fitzwater, talking to Helen Thomas, who's the Dean of the White House Correspondents. Now, Brit, you must have some personal feelings at this point after all this many miles.
Well, Peter, this night reminds me very much of a night in 1980 when the president had won the Iowa caucuses and headed into New Hampshire under what looked like a very big head of steam. You may recall his slogan then was Big Mo, and he was thought likely, or at least a possible winner there in New Hampshire, and he got trounced by a 2-to-1 margin by a man named Ronald Reagan. And I remember the people who were there. Many of them I see are here tonight. And I remember how sort of shocked and disappointed they seemed that night. It's very much the atmosphere I see here in this hall. But it makes me think of another thing about George Bush. He kind of endured and carried on. And I rather suspect he'll be fine tonight. Here comes his great friend and political advisor, Secretary Baker, former Secretary Baker. That's his elder son, George W., his son, Marvin, daughter-in-law, Margaret. I see his daughter, Dorothy, and her new husband, and other members of the family. It'll be a very crowded stage before all this is over. And here's Secretary Baker.
Okay, George. By the way, we now project that North Dakota is going to go for George Bush. Some of the more novel suggestions we've heard today about a Clinton administration suggest he might even ask Secretary of State Baker to stay on as the Middle East envoy. We'll see how that goes. At any rate, this is not a night necessarily for putting new people in new jobs or old people in old jobs.
Thank you very much.
Let's listen to Mr. Baker. He left the State Department to go back and run this campaign. He did not succeed.
Thank you all. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. 1 minute, please. Thank you very, very much. You know, it's real hell to lose these squeakers, isn't it? I want to tell you that for the past 35 years, I've been fortunate to call George Bush my friend, and I have had the great pleasure of introducing him in almost all of the many different capacities in which he has so ably served this great country of ours. And for nearly 4 years now, I have had the privilege of introducing him as the President of the United States. And ladies and gentlemen, there is only one way to introduce the President of the United States, and that is to say to you, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Well, David, to begin with, I cannot imagine a more graceful introduction than the one Jim Baker gave him. This is not the finest moment by any means in Jim Baker's career of organizing and managing political campaigns, but he's in the shadows now. This is time to listen to the President.
You know, as he said, there's only one way to introduce a president. When he comes to an event,
hey, listen, we got to get going.
the Secret Service comes in and hands you a 3x5 card. On it, it says, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States. And that's all they want you to say.
Hey, thank you very much. Look, thank you so much. Well, here's the way I see it. Here's the way we see it, and the country should see it, that the people have spoken, and we respect the majesty of the democratic system. I just called Governor Clinton over in Little Rock and offered my congratulations. He did run a strong campaign. I wish him well in the White House, and I want the country to know that our entire administration will work closely with his team to ensure the smooth transition of power. There is important work to be done, and America must always come first. So we will get behind this new president and wish him well. And to all who voted for us, voted for me, here, especially here, but all across the country, thank you for your support. And we have fought the good fight, and we've kept the faith, and I believe I have upheld the honor of the presidency of the United States. And now I ask that we stand behind our new president, and regardless of our differences, all Americans share the same purpose, to make this, the world's greatest nation, more safe and more secure, and to guarantee every American a shot at the American dream. And I would like to thank so many of you who have worked beside me to improve America and to literally change the world. Let me thank our great Vice President, Dan Quayle. You know, in the face of a tremendous pounding, he stood for what he believes in, and he will always have my profound gratitude and certainly my respect. And I would like to salute so many that did special work. Rich Bond up at the RNC, Bob Teeter, who ran the campaign, Bob Mossbacher, our entire campaign team, and they've run a valiant effort in a very, very difficult year. And I also want to salute the members of the cabinet, all of whom have served this nation with honor, with integrity, and with great distinction. And I would like to single out two leaders who represent the ideals of the ideal in public service. Together they've helped lead the world through a period of unprecedented transition. I'm talking, of course, about my National Security Advisor, Brent Scowcroft, and Jim Baker, and my good friend and fellow Texan, our Secretary of State, Jim Baker. And finally, of course, I want to thank my entire family with a special emphasis on a woman named Barbara. She has inspired this entire nation, and I think the country will always be grateful. But tonight is really not a night for speeches, but I want to share a special message with the young people of America. You see, I remain absolutely convinced that we are a rising nation. We have been in an extraordinarily difficult period, but do not be deterred, kept away from public service by the smoke and fire of a campaign year or the ugliness of politics. As for me, I plan to I'm going to serve and try to find ways to help people, but I plan to get very active in the grandchild business. And in finding ways to help others. But I urge you, the young people of this country, to participate in the political process. It needs your idealism, it needs your drive, it needs your conviction. And again, my thanks, my congratulations to Governor Clinton, to his running mate, Senator Gore, and my special thanks to each and every one of you, many of you who have been my side in every single political battle. May God bless the United States of America. Thank you very, very much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Again, Peter, George Bush said a couple of months ago, that if he lost, he would spend half of his time in Maine and half of his time in Texas. I don't know where he would stay in Texas. He doesn't have a house there.
Well, he has a plot of land there. It's interesting looking at Mrs. Bush, David, because some people who know the Bushes very well believe that she saw this coming some time ago, and though she's always stood firmly at her husband's side as a political wife, that a part of her is glad to have George Bush back. This is not the first time he said he was going to get active in the grandchild business. But politics, as we all know, is an unsentimental business, and it's not going to be very long before people begin to ask, where did the Republican Party go wrong? Did it go wrong at the convention? Was it Bush that lost, or was it Clinton who won? Was it a bad campaign? Was it a bad economy? Did the president start too late? Did he campaign too little? Did he miss opportunities? He's been already criticized from certainly the more conservative wing of the Republican Party for being slow to respond to the storm warnings about the economy, and that he seemed, as one of them said, reluctant to sail into the political fray. As I said, it's an unsentimental business. One thing about George Bush and Bill Clinton, they have always said they personally liked each other. I think we've always had the impression that George Bush and Ross Perot in particular didn't lose any love between one another, but they worked together, for example, in education. And there is the president saying all the right things tonight, promising to get behind the new president, appealing to the young people to become involved. And now here is Vice President Quayle and his wife. who many people have seen as doing better in this political campaign, in some respects even than President Bush, laying down his markers for 1996.
Bush's little speech, I thought, was the perfectly polite speech.
Thank you. No, thank you.
There's no question that in this election campaign, he has been there every step of the way for the president. Campaigned ferociously for his re-election. I wonder if he's surprised.
I have just a few minutes ago, I spoke to Governor Clinton, and I congratulated him. No, tonight is Bill Clinton's night, and I congratulated Bill Clinton, and we must all pull together now. He is going to be the President of the United States for the next 4 years. He deserves our congratulations. He ran a good campaign. He ran a tough campaign. If he runs the country as well as he ran his campaign, we'll be all right. My friends, these last 4 years, I've had the privilege to serve with one of the most outstanding individuals I've ever met, George Bush. He is one of the most honest, decent, caring individuals that I have ever met. Marilyn and I count the President and Barbara Bush as special friends, and the two of them have done a lot for America.
The winner.
Well, maybe this is what they were waiting for, David, for the Gore family to get up from Tennessee. Who knows? Who would have believed it 12 months ago?
Very few.
Hillary Clinton.
Her daughter, Chelsea.
Hillary Clinton, the first lady with a postgraduate degree. She's a law degree.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. My fellow Americans, on this day, with high hopes and brave hearts, in massive numbers, the American people have voted to make a new beginning. This election is a clarion call for our country to face the challenges of the end of the Cold War and the beginning of the next century. To restore growth to our country and opportunity to our people. To empower our own people so that they can take more responsibility for their own lives. To face problems too long ignored, from AIDS to the environment to the conversion of our economy from a defense to a domestic economic giant. And perhaps most important of all, to bring our people together as never before so that our diversity can be a source of strength in a world that is ever smaller, where everyone counts and everyone is a part of America's family. I want to begin this night by thanking my family, my wife, without whom I would not be here tonight, and who I believe will be one of the greatest first ladies in the history of this republic. And you can cheer for her. I also want to say a special word of thanks to our daughter for putting up with our absence, for supporting our effort, for being brave in the face of adversity, and for reminding us every day about what this election is really all about. I want to thank my mother, my brother, my stepfather, my mother-in-law and father-in-law, my brothers-in-law, and my sister-in-law who carried this campaign across this country and stuck up for me when others were trying to put it down. I love them and I thank them. I want to thank the people of this wonderful small state. Time after time, when this campaign was about to be counted out, the Arkansas Travelers exploded out of this state around the country to tell people the truth about what we had done here together, how we had pulled together, what we believed in, and what we could do as a nation. I had the best staff and cabinet you can imagine. They kept this state together, and even when we weren't here, we continued to lead the country in job growth, in keeping taxes and spending down, and in pulling the people of Arkansas together to show what we could do if the nation pulled together and moved forward too. I want to thank the people who are in that infamous group, the FOBs, the Friends of Bill and the Friends of Hillary. No person who ever sought this office was more aided by the friends of a lifetime, and I will never forget you. I want to thank the people in the new Democratic Party, headed by our chairman, Ron Brown, the new members of Congress, the new blood, the new direction that we are giving. And finally, I want to thank the members of my brilliant, aggressive, unconventional, but always winning campaign staff. They were unbelievable. And they have earned this. I want want to say, if I might, a special word of thanks to two people who lost their lives in the course of this campaign, without whom we might not be here tonight. Our friends Paul Tully and Vic Razor, our prayers are with them. They're looking down on us tonight, and they're awful happy. Not very long ago, I received a telephone call from President Bush. It was a generous and forthcoming telephone call of real congratulations and an offer to work with me in keeping our democracy running in an effective and important transition. I want all of you to join with me tonight in expressing our gratitude to President Bush for his lifetime of public service, for the effort he made from the time he was a young soldier in World War II, to helping to bring about an end to the Cold War, to our victory in the Gulf War, to the grace with which he conceded the results of this election tonight in the finest American tradition. Let's give Mr. Bush and his family a hand. I heard tonight Mr. Perot's remarks and his offer to work with us. I say to you, of all the things that he said, I think perhaps the most important that we understand here in the heartland of Arkansas is the need to reform the political system, to reduce the influence of special interest and give more influence back to the kind of people that are in this crowd tonight, with the tens of thousands, and I will work with him to do that. And finally, let me say how profoundly indebted I am tonight, beyond the folks at home, beyond the wonderful people who worked in this administration, the Lieutenant Governor and others to keep our government going, beyond all the others, I have to say a special word of thanks to my magnificent running mate, Senator Al Gore, and his family. I want to tell you that Al and Tipper, Hillary and I have become friends. I admire them for what they stand for. They're enjoyable to be with. They believe in our country. Al Gore is a man of almost unparalleled combination of intelligence, commitment, compassion, and concern to the people of this country, to our obligation to preserve our environment, to our duty to promote freedom and peace in the world, and together we're going to do our best to give you a new partnership for a new America. I want to thank Al's children, his brother-in-law, and his wonderful parents. They made about as many votes in some states as we did. I think we carried every state that Senator and Mrs. Gore campaigned in. Their percentage was the best of all. I want to say that we have established a partnership in this campaign that we will continue into this new administration. For if we have learned anything in the world today, it is that we can accomplish more by teamwork, by working together, by bringing out the best in all the people that we seek, and we will seek the best and most able and most committed people throughout this country to be a part of our team. We will ask the Democrats who believe in our cause to come forward, but we will look too among the ranks of independents and Republicans who are willing to roll up their sleeves, be a part of a new partnership, and get on with the business of dealing with this nation's problems. I remind you again tonight, my fellow Americans, that this victory was more than a victory of party. It was a victory for the people who work hard and play by the rules. A victory for the people who feel left out and left behind, but want to do better. A victory for the people who are ready to compete and win in the global economy, but who need a government that offers a hand up, not a handout. That is what we offer, and that is what tomorrow we will begin to work to provide to all of you. Today, the steel worker and the stenographer, the teacher and the nurse had as much power in the mystery of our democracy as the president, the billionaire, and the governor. You all spoke with equal voices for change. And tomorrow we will try to give you that. You can trust us to wake up every day remembering the people we saw in the bus trips, the people we saw in the town meetings, the people we touched at the rallies, the people who had never voted before, the people who hadn't voted in 20 years, the people who'd never voted for a Democrat, the people who had given up hope. All of them together are saying, we want our future back, and I intend to help give it to you. I say to all of those who voted for us, this was a remarkable coalition for change. Many of you had to put aside this or that personal ambition to be a part of a broad, deep commitment to change this country. I ask you to keep that commitment as we move from election to governing. We need more than ever for those of you who said, let's put the public interest over personal interest, to keep it right there for 4 years so we can turn this country around. I say to all those who voted for Mr. Bush or Mr. Perot, those who voted for the president, those who voted for Ross Perot, I know you love your country too. I ask you to listen to the voice of your leaders. I ask you to join with us in creating a reunited states, a united country with a new sense of patriotism to face the challenges of this new time. We need your help too, and we will do our best to deserve it. When we seek to offer young people the opportunity to borrow the money they need to go to college and the challenge to pay it back through national service, when we challenge the insurance companies, the drug companies, the providers and the consumers, the government to give us a new health care system, when we offer those on welfare new opportunity and the challenge to move to work, when we ask companies to take the incentives we offer to put American people to work and export American products, not American jobs, all of this is a part of a new patriotism to lift our people up and enable all of us to live up to the fullest of our potential. I accept tonight the responsibility that you have given me to be the leader of this, the greatest country in human history. I accept it with a full heart and a joyous spirit. But I ask you to be Americans again, too. To be interested not just in getting, but in giving. Not just in placing blame, but now in assuming responsibility. Not just in looking out for yourselves, but in looking out for others, too. In this very place, 1 year and 1 month ago today, I said, we need more than new laws, new promises, or new programs. We need a new spirit of community, a sense that we're all in this together. If we have no sense of community, the American dream will continue to wither. Our destiny is bound up with the destiny of every American. We're all in this together, and we will rise or fall together. That has been my message to the American people for the past 13 months, and it will be my message for the next 4 years. Together, we can do it. Together, we can make the country that we love everything it was meant to be. I still believe in a place called hope. God bless America. Thank you all. I would like to ask Senator Gore to come up here and say a few words as we begin our new partnership for a new country. Please welcome him to the platform.
Do or don't.
Thank you, President-elect Bill Clinton. For Tipper and me and our 4 children, this has been an extraordinary journey. I want to, first of all, thank Bill and Hillary and Chelsea, knowing of all the sacrifices they have made and the hardships they have endured. And I would like to thank the person who is most important in my life, Tipper Gore. To our four children, Corinna, Kristen, Sarah, and Albert, to my parents, Albert and Pauline Gore, and to my brother-in-law, Frank Hunger, I can never express the thanks that I feel in my heart. This has been a time of discovery, a time of restored dreams and renewed hope, a time when the strength and promise of America has revealed itself, poised to meet the challenges of a new day. None of this could have been possible for me without the people of the state of Tennessee, and I want to thank them from the bottom of my heart. I also want to thank the wonderful men and women on the staff who have helped us secure this victory, and I want to say to all of you who have helped us reach this moment that I look forward to the high challenges of national office, and I consider it a matter of tremendous honor and pride to work in behalf of Bill Clinton to be successful in leading this nation toward a new and brighter future. Bill Clinton spoke sensibly and honestly to the American people. As the attacks against him became more and more desperate, he remained calm. He believed in the American people and kept faith that hope would indeed triumph over fear. Bill Clinton won because he was willing to lose. He refused to mislead voters. He stuck to his beliefs. He asked for your vote by challenging you to make America better. Where I come from, we have a name for that. It's called character.
Anybody who thinks this is the Jefferson airplane's out of their mind. Fleetwood Mac again. And so concludes this evening in Little Rock with two men who seem almost compelled David to go on campaigning.
I felt like saying to them, you have won. You don't have to make another long speech. You have won. It's over. You won.
On the other hand, they've won, and so we'll listen, too.
No, we did listen.
You're looking at the man who'll be the 42nd President of the United States. As you said a little while ago, the first lady who'll have a postgraduate degree. Just before midnight in Little Rock, Arkansas, if ever a man and a team should feel humble, this was it. When we come back, we're going to ask our far-flung or reasonably far-flung staff of correspondents and commentators to give you one more sense of how this evening has looked overall. I hope you'll stay with us. We'll tell you where the governor's races have ended up, the Senate, what is still too close to call, and what you can expect in the hours ahead.